Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it.
Tim belonged to that category of people for whom personal image was paramount. Throughout his not very long life, he repeatedly made a stunning impression on others. And to achieve this high goal, the average entrepreneur used not only known, but even forbidden techniques. In other words, Tim did not disdain any tricks. Unfortunately, Lucy, late businessman, did not immediately realize with what a difficult man she decided to tie her fate many years ago. For almost 12 years of marriage, the woman has regretted it more than once. In moments of despair, she even mentally cursed the day when she met the businessman. Even now, when the burden of the theft suddenly fell on her shoulders, she sent her late husband only warm words. Though the young woman didn't really believe in telepathy, she relied on the power of her numerical message. Staring with a wandering gaze at her husband's portrait in a mourning frame, she sent him impulse after impulse. "Well, Tim, have you had enough? Did you think that like a fairy tale hero you could run away from everyone and hide? But it didn't work out. This time, life set a trap for you. Could you have imagined that you would be killed by a stupid accident in the prime of your life? You must have planned a beautiful exit from this earthly life. And then you took a banal turn, a dumpster. Two fighting bums and the proverbial banana peel. It was the latter that played the fatal role. Tim had no idea that something inevitable would happen to him in a minute. When he was awakened in the middle of the night by a late-night phone call from his wife. "Lucy, I'm sorry if I woke you, but I'm here. I'll have to leave the car in the yard because I have to get up at 6 o'clock tomorrow." Suddenly, the animated tone was replaced by surprise. "What is this outrage? And guys, stop it." This harsh remark obviously did not apply to this Lucy, so Lucy got worried and asked, "Tim, what's going on over there? Who are you yelling at?" "Oh, nothing much. The local bums are sorting it out." "Wait, I'll go. I'll explain everything to them." The woman shouted into the phone, asking her husband not to interfere in someone else's squabbles. But he couldn't hear her anymore because he went to clean up. The man did not turn off his cell phone, and she heard the car door slam first, and then muffled shouts were heard. "Stop hitting each other. We don't know what happened. I'm going to call the police now if you don't calm down." Her husband's voice, which brought other sounds to her. Then everything suddenly went silent. The woman screamed into the receiver for several minutes. Tim, where are you? What's going on out there?" Since there was no response, Lucy went downstairs. The elderly concierge looked at her sternly. "Where are you going so late? It's almost 1:30 in the morning." Lucy threw something vague over her shoulder because her heart was already fluttering with a sense of anxiety. She rushed to her husband's car, hoping she still had time to warn him of the danger. The businessman's car stood with the door open. For a few seconds, the woman looked around in panic. "Tim, where are you?" A suspicious rustle was heard from the side of the garbage dump. She ran up just as the large man's body began to convulse. Lucy rushed over to the injured man. He even tried to smile despite his critical condition. "Lucy, be careful with the banana peel. Can you believe I slipped and hit my head on the edge of that metal thing? It's almost a classic situation." The man tried to lift his head, but cried out in pain and stopped. Lucy immediately remembered the first aid algorithm. She told her husband Tim not to move. "I'm going to call an ambulance now." Grabbing the cell phone lying on the driver's seat, the woman called an ambulance. The husband gestured for her to bend over. She lowered herself to the ground and took Tim's hand. "Hold on, don't go away. The paramedics will be here soon. Just don't pass out. Talk to me," he whispered quietly. "I'm trying, but I can't. I don't want to go." Just like that, without saying goodbye. A series of new convulsions ran through the man's body and he stopped moving. The last thing the husband said was, "Lucy, I'm sorry for everything that's happened. What's in store for you? Call and go where?" Lucy still held his strong hand. An ambulance siren wailed in the distance, but it was too late. Tim had died honorably and ignominiously by the garbage cans. The paramedics diagnosed an open head injury and called the police to the scene. When law enforcement officers arrived, Lucy had not yet fully realized what had happened. She recounted the events of the last 20 minutes in detail, stumbling over every phrase. The policeman, as if summarizing, asked, "So, apart from you, are there any other witnesses to what happened?" The woman did not have time to answer this question, as something suspiciously stirred behind the garbage cans. One of the operatives rushed to the container and pulled out a frightened homeless man. "Here's our comrade, Captain. We're incredibly lucky. We have one witness." The policeman couldn't resist. "Only he stinks so badly you can't breathe." The homeless man raised his head proudly. "Gentlemen, everything in this world is relative, and what smells bad today may become a trend or a flavor tomorrow." While everyone present tried to understand the depth of meaning of this phrase, the homeless man gained confidence. "We want to make ourselves known." The captain came to life. "And who are we? You weren't here alone." "Sure, we were with Max, doing our evening rounds and arguing a little, when this guy showed up." "Who's Max?" Homeless guy's got his shoulders back in the air. "This is my partner." He turned to the trash cans and made an expressive gesture with his right hand. "Max, come out. Let's tell it like it was. The police might think we killed the body, and we don't want that. We're honest citizens. We didn't plan any of this." The partner, a talkative homeless man, timidly crawled out of his hiding place. For about 5 minutes he listed his worthy qualities while remaining a witness, and only after the presentation began to tell about what had happened. "Yes, it was the boy's own fault. It's freezing in the evening, and it's just slippery here." A man in women's shoes suddenly got behind the wheel and crashed. He had the nerve to tilt the container over his head with all his might. "Max and I heard his skull crack." Max confirmed it. The typical bum's partner just nodded his head and continued his story. "We knew right away that something smelled like kerosene. A long time ago, I worked as a janitor in a hospital, so I saw some horrors there. We used to get barrels like this man's. We wanted to call 103, but we couldn't because this woman showed up." Of course, Lucy in those difficult moments was not up to the testimony of two homeless people. She continued to sit next to her husband, not paying attention to the cold and strangers. The ambulance paramedic gave her an injection, and the concierge quickly helped her get to the apartment. She kept telling her to cry, that it would make her feel better. But everything inside Lucy was petrified. She could neither cry nor scream, although the tragedy had happened less than 2 days ago. It seemed to her as if an eternity had passed. She sat by the coffin, emitting a bitter spirit. Suddenly she felt someone push her. She looked at her husband's portrait and shuddered. It seemed to her that her husband's eyes in the portrait twitched. She felt sick for a moment and quickly looked away from the portrait, where Ariana stood with a mournful face. "First, Lucy Tim." She caught her gaze and whispered distinctly, obviously hoping for the attention of the audience. "Hold on, dear Lucy, and don't forget that you are not alone in this difficult moment." A bitter tear glistened in Arian's eyes, but she quickly brushed it away with a polished gesture. Lucy smiled to herself and thought without anger, Ariana in her usual role. Even from the funeral of her ex-husband, she managed to create a colorful show. And the young woman was not mistaken in her assumptions. After all, it was the first Lucy who organized a solemn farewell in the House of Folkart. The presence of a large group of journalists was also her initiative. However, Ariana did not find it necessary to consult with her on this matter. Simply that same evening, after Lucy's call, she firmly stated, "Lucy, don't worry, I'll take care of everything." The girl didn't immediately understand what she was talking about. "I don't quite understand you." A disgruntled sigh followed. "What's so difficult about it? We both had a loved one die, which means we need to take care of Tim's funeral. So I've decided to take charge of organizing that event, since you've apparently never done anything like this before. So I thought I'd lighten your burden a little." Lucy was uncomfortable with this woman's interference, and she even tried to respond to her with rudeness. "Ariana, I appreciate your help, but it is not always appropriate. In this case, it is definitely against common sense. As Lucy's legal guardian, it's my responsibility to take care of everything." Ariana laughed into the receiver, and Lucy's ears rang painfully. "Darlings, let's not cross swords at such a sorrowful moment. I'll tell you more now that the reason for our opposition has itself fallen away. We might become friends. Think over my offer, and do not be in a hurry to refuse." The conversation was unpleasant to the young widow, and to get rid of the intrusive counselor, she answered in a colorless voice, All right, I'll think it over. See you later. Oh, I almost forgot. Tim's farewell will take place at the House of Folkart. A wave of indignation swept through Lucy's mind again. I think a more modest procedure would have sufficed. I can only imagine how much this setting would cost us. Ariana laughed again, but this time it was a sinister laugh that sent venomous goosebumps running down the young woman's spine. Lucy, you're so Maeve. I told you I'm taking over the funeral arrangements, which means the hall rental and other expenses are on my conscience too. Lucy couldn't help herself. I wonder why the sudden generosity. And Ariana wasn't laughing anymore. There was a note of regret in her voice, much to Tim's surprise. Unfortunately, I'm not altruistic. Tim has spoiled a lot of blood for me in his time. But there is one circumstance that got me involved in the process. But I don't think this is the best time to discuss the matter. The hour will come, and you will know everything. Lucy sat at the headboard of her husband's funeral bed and reflected on the events of the last 2 days. But strangely enough, she was most concerned about Arian's behavior. This woman repeatedly intruded into their life together, without asking and without observing the basic rules of decency. But no matter how hard Lucy tried, she could not contain this insolent woman. When Ariana carelessly hinted that Lucy was experiencing the loss of a loved one for the first time in her life, she was 100 times wrong. The recently widowed woman was only 3.5 years old when she was orphaned. Lucy's parents, young doctors, decided to devote their long-awaited vacation to a sea voyage. They left their daughter in the care of her grandmother, who was strongly opposed to this kind of vacation. Why drag a child on a cruise ship? Who knows what kind of storms there might be? And Lucy would suffer from seasickness. Carlos thought his mother's fears were unfounded. Mom, why do you always make such a big deal out of everything? Many families with small children go on sea cruises and have pleasant experiences, and all you see is horror and danger, as if she had a premonition that something bad was going to happen. As you wish, but I'm not giving you my granddaughter. Let her stay with me. Then my heart will be at peace. The couple had to accept this ultimatum, but it was obvious that the decision of the grandmother pleased them very much. Overheard, her son said to his future daughter-in-law Naomi, "We have the unique opportunity to relive our honeymoon." At that moment, the old woman only smiled and thought that she was ready for anything, as long as her children were happy. The young couple should have already returned from the trip, when the country spread the terrible news that a few kilometers from the coast wrecked the ship Admiral. Did not want to believe such terrible rumors. She hoped that this is just another hoax. But soon the news of the terrible tragedy was confirmed. Grandmother did not say anything to the little granddaughter because she was sure that her son and daughter-in-law are all right and they somehow survived. After all, their names were not on the list of the dead. They were considered missing. But as the days went by, no miracle happened. Despite her young age, Lucy vividly remembered the day she learned she no longer had a father and mother. It was September 1, and the town where her grandmother lived was celebrating the beginning of the school year with great enthusiasm. Explained to the excited girl, "Don't worry, Lucy, time flies. In 3 years, you two will go to first grade for the first time, and Mommy and Daddy will accompany you." During the day, they did not yet know about the tragedy. It became known in the evening, when the holiday was over and the wind scattered candy wrappers and burst balloons around the city. And there was a certain symbolism to it that Lucy realized later. Then, throughout her life, these innocent attributes of the holiday caused her unpleasant memories. She could not get used to the fact that she no longer had a father and mother. On long winter evenings, the girl sat at the window and asked the good fairy, "Please let my mom and dad come back. They didn't do anything wrong. They healed people." The girl believed in her grandmother's fairy tale that her parents had been bewitched by an evil wizard. So she asked the fairy to free them from the charms of the evil sorcerer. Watched this scene with tears in her eyes, but could not bring herself to destroy the hopes of the little granddaughter. After all, she was her best friend, woman, and colleague at work. One day she admonished her, "You shouldn't do that. The girl might go crazy. Tell her Carlos and Naomi are dead." Angelica replied, "I can't do that. I can't destroy the child's hopes. I still believe they are alive. But that's just self-deception. Oh well, so be it. It's easier this way." The grandmother gained custody of her granddaughter, even though Naomi's parents were against it. The bride's relatives blamed Carlos for everything that happened, and the old woman was terribly afraid that they would instill this theory into the still fragile consciousness of her granddaughter. The case even came to court, but in favor of the fact that she was much younger than Naomi's parents. Another strong argument was her science degree and increased benefits. Naomi's parents were simple laborers and earned little. Therefore, the court decided that it could provide its only granddaughter with a better standard of living. Since the case was decided not in their favor, the bride's parents severed all relations with. Only years later, when Lucy grew up, she visited them. And it was her grandmother who insisted on this visit. But she started the conversation from afar. "Lucy, you know that you also have grandparents, right?" The girl was very surprised at this familiarity. "Of course I know. There are lots of pictures of them in the album, but you said they don't want to know about us." The older woman looked embarrassed. "It's not that simple. When Carlos and Naomi died tragically, there was a misunderstanding between us and we stopped communicating." Lucy interrupted her grandmother. "But I'm at the age where I can say anything. It's not hard to guess that the two clans blamed each other for what happened. I'm right." The Trofimovs had to admit their granddaughter was right. "Yes, you're almost right. Naomi's parents blamed Carlos, your dad. They even tried to take you away from me. We even went to court. How awful. Turning a child into a trophy, nothing more horrible and humiliating," asked in a trembling voice. "Are you angry with me? I may have acted unjustly, but at that moment this decision seemed to me the only right thing to do." The girl looked at her grandmother, who was ready to burst into tears and say something stupid. "You are my dearest person in the entire universe." She hugged the elderly woman and then comforted her for a long time. "Grandma, please don't cry. I realize that your actions were motivated by a desire to protect me. Perhaps if I were you, I would have done the same thing. I promise I'll come visit Grandpa Anthony and Grandma Nancy very soon. I just need to finish my exams and then I'll visit them." Lucy had long been concerned about her relatives, and she was anxious to rebuild the broken bridges for that purpose. The time of the student vacation was just right, and Lucy even worked extra practice hours so that nothing would interfere with her plans. After the death of her daughter, Naomi's parents moved to the village, where they settled in the ancestral home of Anthony's grandfather. In their lifestyle, the elderly couple found solace and attended church every Sunday. Lucy appeared unexpectedly, and the old people considered it a miracle. Grandmother Nancy fussed minute by minute around her guest. "Lucy, you don't know how happy Grandpa Anthony and I are. We saw you when you were very little." Grandpa Anthony nodded in agreement and sun bunnies danced in his eyes. "Yes, you were very little. You probably don't remember us, do you?" The girl saw hope in the old man's eyes for the first time in her life and lied. "No, Mel, I remember us coming to visit you. Only you didn't live in the village then, but in the city." "You're right," he said. "We had an apartment, but then we sold it." The man grew sad, but after a moment his eyes lit up again. "Lucy, do you remember Sarah?" The girl froze in amazement, trying to figure out what her grandfather was talking about. Apparently, Grandma Nancy realized that her granddaughter was afraid of offending them and came to her rescue. "By the way, that wooden horse was making a lot of noise. We almost got into a fight with the downstairs neighbors." There were hours of rocking on rocking horses, and this amusement was accompanied by a strong knocking noise. From the grandparents, the girl learned many interesting details from her early childhood. Lucy spent almost a whole month in the village, and it was the most wonderful time of her life, which she always remembered with nostalgia. When it was time to leave, the old people tearfully said goodbye to their granddaughter. "Lucy, don't forget about us. You can't even imagine what your arrival means to us. You showed up, and we took another deep breath." The girl made a solemn promise to her relatives. "You won't get a break from me before I come to visit you again." Unfortunately, the life of medical students is such that they do not know what tomorrow will bring. Lucy diligently kept in touch with the old people. She called them every week, wrote them affectionate letters. But for 2 years, there had been no opportunity to visit them in person. The opportune moment came unexpectedly when the girl was practicing before receiving her diploma. In those years in small settlements, there was an acute shortage of specialists, so the university administration decided to take an active part in solving this social problem. Future doctors were gathered in the assembly hall, and the dean himself made the following statement. Dear colleagues, yes, today I address you as equals, and you have proved that you deserve such treatment. I hope that the professional fire that burns, not smolders in your hearts, will inspire you to new feats for the sake of people's lives. Usually the dean's speeches were shorter and more modest, but here he was so blatantly pompous. The young audience was surprised, and everyone waited impatiently for the dean to finish his speech. But the director's enthusiasm quickly waned, and in the final part, he simply but lucidly addressed everyone. Guys, you know that in medicine, as in the army, what the command orders must be carried out without discussion. Today, there is a very tense situation with the availability of medical services in small settlements. Therefore, you will have to practice in rural areas and district hospitals. The hall immediately buzzed, and the dean lost the opportunity to reach the consciousness of the students. Many classmates openly expressed their indignation at this decision. Others were silently digesting the news, while still others were considering their options. How to escape? This is another commitment. There was another group of students to which Lucy belonged. The girl calmly accepted the prospect of becoming a village doctor. Right after the meeting, she walked into the office and said, "Send me to Colorado. I know for a fact that there is no doctor there, only one paramedic." The woman tasked with assigning students to practice sites was surprised. "It's nice that we haven't run out of volunteers. It's commendable that you came on your own. And by the way, you're the first. But don't get too carried away, girl, because there are cases when students first beat their chests and swear that they are ready for any hardship, and then come here in tears and ask to be transferred to a more comfortable workplace." Lucy assured the woman, "Don't worry, I won't cry and complain." The woman looked at her again with an attentive gaze and entered the necessary information into her list. Having received a referral to the regional office of the Ministry of Health, Lucy began to prepare for the trip. She decided to surprise her relatives and did not inform them of her imminent arrival. I must say that the surprise turned out to be very impressive. When Lucy appeared on the threshold of the apartment with 2 suitcases, her grandmother grabbed her heart and burst into tears. "My little girl, something's happened. You were expelled from the university?" The girl realized that she had made an unforgivable mistake by putting her grandmother's health under stress. She tried to correct this mistake. "Grandma, it's okay. I was not expelled. I'm here for my internship." Lucy froze, hoping to make her grandmother laugh, but she was still in shock and looked reproachfully at her granddaughter. "How can you scare an elderly person like that? You could have warned her about your coming, for decency." The grandmother walked for a few minutes with a resentful look, helping the guests to distribute things. Then she looked fondly at Lucy, "My favorite granddaughter. And I didn't even believe that I would live to see this day." Lucy, as a child, hugged her grandmother and closed her eyes. "Lucy, what are you saying? You taught me to believe and not to give up until the end. And I've always followed that code to the letter. Besides, your joy is a little premature, because I'm not here for good." She didn't hide her disappointment. "I thought, darling, my internship will last a few months, so we'll have plenty of time to socialize." The old woman cheered up again. "Did they send you to our neighborhood hospital?" "No, grandmother, we have such beauty." The girl hugged Anna. "We again. That is, me and my classmates had the high honor of saving rural medicine. I'm going to Colorado. The situation there is catastrophic." Lucy braced herself for her grandmother's tears, but to her surprise, she was delighted. "So it's in the same piece of Pompeii. Does that mean you can stay with Grandpa Anthony and Nancy? I was going to visit them for a month too." It was time for Lucy to be surprised. "Wow. Did I miss something? Since when did you two start visiting each other?" "Friends." The old woman looked meaningfully at her granddaughter and said proudly, "And since I sent you to them. You have your own affairs in the capital. You have no time to deal with us old people. And we, by the way, miss you very much and worry about you. In situations like this, it's best to stick together. The Saints used to come to my birthday party, but now they've invited me to their house." Anthony, in order not to be bored, got busy with the bees. "As a doctor, you must know that spring honey is the healthiest, so I agreed to volunteer to be a taster. Maybe I won't die after tasting it." Lucy listened to her grandmother's emotional story and did not understand what puzzled her more, the fact of establishing contacts or the speech filled with village words. She couldn't resist making a remark. "Wow, you surprised me. Where did you pick up such expressions?" The old woman didn't even bat an eye. "And I like it, because every dialect has its own unique verbal expressions. If you want to reveal the genesis of people living in a certain territory. Yes, you got an amazing and incredible mixture of biology and philology," playfully winked at granddaughter Lucy. "That's what our people are based on." The girl decided not to enter into unnecessary arguments, and it is unlikely that such a duel would end with her victory. Perhaps the news of the reconciliation of the two sides was the most joyful of the day. And at the end of the week, Lucy went to the place of her internship, as promised, also moved to the village for the summer. Thus, the elderly relatives created a strong support for their beloved granddaughter. After all, the novice general practitioner had no time even for a quiet lunch. As soon as the local population learned about the appearance of the young doctor at the paramedic station, crowds of sick and just curious citizens flocked here. Lucy did not refuse anyone because she had no moral right to do so. People often knocked on her door in the middle of the night and asked for help on weekends. One Sunday morning in August, Ariana came to her in a luxurious foreign car. From that day on, the girl's life took a sharp turn, and the main priorities shifted from public interests to personal ones. Experienced people say that in order to become a real soldier, you need to withstand the first battle with dignity. This military truth finds confirmation in medicine as well. Just for a month of work in the village medical station, Lucy learned a lot of things that she had not even suspected before. But the main conclusion the young doctor made in the first few days: life is not as it is described in textbooks. She had been warned about it by a paramedic who had been carrying the burden of the problems of a rural institution on her shoulders for many years. Perhaps it was that burden that sometimes drove Jacob to drunkenness. On her first day on the job, Lucy smelled the odor of alcohol coming from her older colleague. Noticing her grimace, the man said cheerfully, "Yes, I know I'm not a very pleasant odor, but that's just a side effect of the previous evening. I don't indulge in strong drinks on weekdays." But the smell in the paramedic's office. The girl realized that he celebrates holidays almost every day. Since she was a temporary person in the rural health facilities, she decided to ignore the habit of the older comrade. Jacob started his internship in an unusual way. He decided to talk a little about the works of a great classicist. "Lucy, did you notice that I have the same name as a literary genius?" Most likely, the man expected the girl to be embarrassed, but she answered without hesitation. "Of course. It is impossible to pass by such a similarity indifferently. But despite all the problems that exist today, you are still more fortunate than Michael." Jacob was puzzled. "I wonder what that luck is." "Everything. You can't deny that today's conditions are much better than they were at the end of the 19th century. The paramedic crossed his arms across his chest. "Really, Lucy, you've cracked me up. I can see that you are not only good at medicine, although it is known that the writer also liked to drink and prod. But Michael wasn't prone to excess and always kept to moderation." Jacob raised his hands in surrender. "I give up. I can't argue with you. I have to admit that it would be a pleasure to work in tandem with such an intelligent and, moreover, beautiful girl." Throughout her years of study, Lucy had been diligently accumulating knowledge. However, despite the extensive knowledge she had gained at university, the young specialist felt insecure in her first days. That is why Jacob was always there to support the young doctor in case of difficulties. He spoke several times a day. "Don't doubt it, Lucy. I am below your rank, but experience is a great thing. In my field, I can make a diagnosis simply by breathing and pulse. I know everything about every patient. People trust me. I value that trust very much." As the first days of the appointment showed, the paramedic exaggerated these assurances. Visitors flocked, but everyone was eager to get to the young doctor. At first, this nickname in the style of Allah annoyed the girl, but she quickly got used to this treatment. Lucy also got used to the constant absences of her older companion. The first time Jacob asked her, his eyes glittering suspiciously, "Lucy, could you cover for me for a couple hours?" She answered without hesitation. "Sure, do you have any problems?" The man was slightly embarrassed and muttered, Yes, there are some domestic difficulties. Well, you mind your own business and I'll handle the reception alone. Are you sure we won't have an inspection today? Not a week later, Jacob made the same request again, but this time he was a little more brazen. Lucy, I need your help one more time. Are you in trouble again? The paramedic grinned. Not again, but still. I guess I'm just unlucky or something. Trouble just keeps coming at me. Before I can even deal with one problem, another one comes knocking at the door. My wife's mother showed up unannounced. The girl shrugged her shoulders in surprise. It seems to me that when relatives come to visit, it's a joyous occasion. But this relative can spoil everything. And believe me, there is no joy from her, only trouble. The paramedic thought his joke was a good one and burst into laughter. Lucy did not share his cheerful mood, thinking his colleague's remark inappropriate. She said indifferently, "All right, Jacob, I'll let you go." Some time passed, and the paramedic disappeared again without warning. It was the height of the rowing season when suspected poisoning was on the rise among patients who could get to the paramedic station on their own. Lucy took calls on the spot in between waves of patients and also had to cycle to neighboring villages. It was in this real-life situation that an expensive foreign car pulled up to the paramedic station. "Ariana." She threw Lucy a condescending glance. "So you're the new doctor?" "Yes, that's me. If you have an appointment, come into the office." The visitor laughed. "Well, I'm not really worried about my health. I'm fine because, unlike some people, I don't eat junk food." To speed things up, the doctor asked, "Has anyone close to you been sick?" The woman raised her perfectly straight eyebrows disapprovingly. "Well, how should I put this? I don't even know the right way to say it. My ex-husband ate something and now his stomach hurts. I wanted to call an ambulance, but my neighbor said it was useless. She advised me to come to you." "I understand. Just a moment. Wait. I'll pay for the emergency kit. Tell me your address. I'll be there shortly." "We are located off Chicago, Building B, Chicago." Lucy froze. "But Chicago is not in our neighborhood." Seeing Lucy heading back with the kit, the visitor stirred. The arrogance disappeared from her leathery face, and she even grabbed Lucy's arm. "Doctor, dear Lucy, don't leave me in this difficult situation. Understand that someone very close to me is in critical condition right now." The woman looked at her pleadingly and Lucy felt uncomfortable. "Okay, I will examine your patient. You said your spouse ate mushrooms." The woman smiled obediently and corrected the doctor. "Yes, my ex-husband loves culinary experiments, and it's useless to tell him that it's very dangerous. I have a car, I'll take you there and then bring you back." Already sitting behind the wheel, the woman introduced herself as Ariana. "But you can call me Ariana. I don't mind. I can't stand conventions at all. Our society has a distorted view of family relationships. I completely reject all conventions." Ariana was an experienced driver. She felt confident even on a bumpy country road. Lucy watched with admiration as she deftly maneuvered around potholes and bumps. But the new acquaintances did not pay attention to such trifles and continued to tell the young doctor about the peculiarities of their family life. "My husband and I have been divorced for 5 years, but we have managed to keep good relations. We have a business together and our friendship has a positive effect on our business." Lucy was about to say something neutral when the woman interrupted her. "We're almost there. See that 2-story cottage? That's our country house. After the divorce, we didn't divide the property like some people do. We decided it would be much easier to live together." Lucy couldn't resist asking, "And how do you manage that if it's no secret?" "It's very simple. We set up a visiting schedule so we don't overlap on the grounds. Tim, that's my husband's name, comes here on certain days. I stick to my schedule too. And if there are any special situations that arise that go beyond the schedule, that is also easily solved. You just need to inform your companion about force majeure." But Lucy had no personal experience of married life. Her grandparents adhered to completely different principles. Therefore, she could not judge other people's family life. Although Ariana surprised her with her frank story, the girl quickly turned her attention to her professional duties. Entering the spacious lobby on the first floor of the house, she immediately asked, "Can you please tell me where I can wash my hands and then escort me to the sick man?" The owner of the house, Sophia, escorted the doctor to the bathroom and waited for her to wash her hands before handing her fresh towels. The patient was in a small room on the first floor. Ariana opened the door and announced in a tragic voice, "Tim, I brought the doctor. Get ready to be examined." In the room, Lucy could barely make out a man lying on a pile of pillows. She asked the landlady to pull the curtains open. "Please, the curtains. It's so dark and stuffy in here." And she hurriedly complied with the doctor's request. Sunlight flooded the room and the man frowned. "I could slap you," Lucy reassured him, "but then you die." "What are you complaining of?" "Weakness, severe nausea. I was sick last night too, and my stomach hurts. Walking doesn't hurt much." Watching the examination from the sidelines, Ariana decided it was time to speak up. "Doctor, without an examination, I can tell you that Tim has food poisoning. Yesterday, they all went to the woods together, picking different mushrooms, and then had a picnic in the yard." Suddenly, the man interrupted the woman very abruptly. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? You are misleading the doctor. We were alone under a birch tree, picking hogs, and these are elite mushrooms." He looked hopefully at the doctor. "And I ate only a little of the fish soup. My stomach was bothering me before that. I thought maybe I'd lifted something heavy." Lucy asked the patient to lie still. "We're going to check your stomach now." She didn't even have time to touch that part of his body before the man cried out in pain. Lucy looked at Arian meaningfully. "It appears your patient has acute appendicitis." The woman frowned disapprovingly. "Are you sure?" The doctor calmly replied, "No, but all the symptoms point to it. We'll have to call an ambulance, because in cases like this, delay could cost lives." Arian's former self-confidence returned to her. "What are you talking about? You're trying to scare us. You have no experience, so I don't trust you." "Why did you call me in then?" Lucy grabbed her kit and headed for the exit, holding her right side. Tim jumped up from the bed. In a burst of emotion, he even raised his hand at his ex-wife. "What kind of person are you? Do you really want me to die here from appendicitis? Let's call an ambulance." He caught up with Lucy already in the hallway. "Doctor girl, don't run away. I can't catch up with you." The girl stopped. "Sick. Do you really think it's better not to make unnecessary movements?" The man couldn't stand straight, so he bent over, writhing in pain. "You're making me run after you. Please don't leave me alone. Honestly, I'm afraid my ex Lucy won't call an ambulance because of her principles." Tim looked around. "I should have arranged it with her beforehand and then called the doctor." "Where's your phone?" The man holding his side pointed to the coffee table. "Here's a reliable satellite device." Lucy had experience with such devices and dialed the emergency number. Soon an ambulance arrived, and the doctor had to go with the patient to the district hospital, as the owner of the house refused this mission. Ariana felt insulted. "I can see that my presence is not necessary." She kissed the man's hand with ostentatious tenderness as a sign of protection. "I will not be silent," and waved her hand from the porch. "Tim is recovering. If I have a moment to spare, I'll be sure to visit you." The man sighed bitterly. "Doctor, imagine I've lived with that snake for over 10 years. Perhaps he expected words of sympathy, but the girl was silent. They didn't say a word to each other until they reached the hospital. From the emergency room, the patient was quickly transferred to the operating room. The doctor on duty praised Lucy. "You did well, colleague. You worked quickly and correctly diagnosed the patient." The praise somewhat embarrassed Tim, and she even tried to justify herself. "But it's just appendicitis. Even a second-year student wouldn't misdiagnose it." The doctor on duty shook his head. "You are deeply mistaken. Like any other disease, appendicitis likes to disguise itself. So consider yourself lucky today." Consider that luck an accomplishment. The appendix literally burst in the surgeon's hands. Another half hour and we would have had peritonitis. After saying that, Lucy couldn't just go back to Colorado. With the surgeon's permission, she visited the patient. Tim's face was paler than a sheet, but he was smiling. "Tell me, what's your name?" "My visitor?" Lucy. "Thank you, Lucy." He kissed her hand, and that kiss burned with fire until the evening. The next day, the girl remembered the sick man she had saved and his kiss. Even Jacob noticed the girl's strange behavior. "Lucy, what's the matter with you? You're glowing. I would have thought you were in love." Lucy caught his co-worker's eye. "Jacob, you have a strange idea. Unfortunately, love is not a small thing, but the ultimate reward. Lucy looked at the paramedic in surprise. Those are just pretty words. In real life, it's different. Jacob only smiled, but he kept his opinion. A little time passed, and the girl changed her views on love and life. After being discharged from the hospital, the businessman with a talking surname went into the paramedic station to once again express his gratitude to the young doctor. He did it beautifully and pompously. First, he scattered snow-white roses on the porch. And then right from the porch, he made a fiery speech praising the humble village doctors who selflessly saved the lives of ordinary people. The residents of nearby houses gathered to watch this colorful performance. And Tim, surprised by the speed of the grapevine, was impressed. Tim's show was spectacular, and it couldn't have been more different. After all, improvisation was the businessman's favorite skill. During the years of hard life, when there were only piranhas and hyenas around you, the man excelled in this art. However, the modest inhabitants of the small village were content with more modest spectacles, even on television, so they almost clapped their hands with delight, and the elderly matrons even wept secretly. How beautifully he arranged everything, just like in the movies. How lucky our doctor. Delighted sighs came to Lucy, and she even mentally noted that the villagers recognized her as their own. To realize this sense of community was as pleasant for the girl as watching Tim. Lucy had never felt such strong emotions in her life. At those moments, she was insanely happy and thought that such a man could only be a dream. If I were lucky enough to meet such a man, I would love only him for the rest of my life. Perhaps it was at that very moment that her thoughts were poetically transmitted to the fairies she believed in as a child. The sorceress, with the help of her all-powerful wand, instantly turned the girl's life around after an epic performance on the shabby porch of the village dad. Tim decided not to waste any time and immediately proposed to this Lucy. The girl accepted without a second thought. She did not even suspect that the businessman fully coordinated this important step with his first wife. The main feature of their marriage with Tim was his ex, Lucy Ariana. When Lucy saw her rival's name on the guest of honor list at their wedding, it caused her sincere indignation. Tim, I'm sick of this. It's like your ex Lucy is everywhere. You can't even hide from her at night. I wouldn't be surprised if one day your Ariana crawls out from under the bed at the most intimate moment. The man listened to Lucy, smiling guiltily, and answered Lucy calmly, "You and I are modern people, so it is not appropriate to start our life together with scandals and quarrels. I can tell you one thing. Ariana has done a lot. Basically, she made me a prominent figure in the business world. And although our marital relationship has long since cooled, we try to maintain business ties, and that's worth a lot," the girl wryly remarked. "I can't judge, because I have completely different values." At that moment, she was most surprised not by her husband-to-be's statement, but by the way Tim uttered this monologue. The man said it all in a calm tone, but made it clear that Lucy's opinion did not matter much to him. The girl decided not to aggravate the situation before the wedding, but after the celebration, such episodes were repeated regularly. Very soon, Lucy realized that her opinion and feelings do not need anyone, because her husband consults with his first wife on all important issues. Ariana could show up at their new home at any time. Without any shyness, she gave advice to young Lucy of her ex-husband. Acquaintances even admired the nobility of this woman. "Ariana is the epitome of decency. Our planet counts on women like her. Where else can you find such an example of self-sacrifice without any selfishness? She helps her ex-husband's young lady-in-waiting." Lucy herself, as well as her elderly relatives, did not share such enthusiasm. The old people were horrified by the news that their granddaughter is marrying a capital city businessman. Anna, in duet with Nancy's grandmother, recited for days on end. "Lucy, this is crazy. I don't understand what this man has done for you. We've lived long lives, and we know that hasty marriages don't lead to anything good." Baba Nancy nodded vigorously at first, topped with a sly wink, and then decided to put in her weighty word. "Yes, girl, she's right. Think to yourself, what's the age difference? After all, your Tim is 17 years older than you. He's like a father to you." At that moment, the women were firmly interrupted by Grandpa Anthony. "Nancy, what does age have to do with it? It's normal. It's good to have a husband much older than his wife. This Tim is an established man and he's not going to bother his parents. Personally, I'm more concerned about something else. Grandma didn't like to be interrupted. She pressed her thin lips together disapprovingly and glared fiercely at her husband. Do you really have to interfere? I know perfectly well what's bothering you. Grandfather realized that the conversation is taking an undesirable turn and peacefully asked the crook to remember the proverb. He who remembers old times, woe to him. You, Anthony, better watch your eyes. We're telling the truth. Actually, this whole thing is very suspicious. I mean, this Ariana, sticking her nose in everything. Our women told us how she tried to set her own rules in the village, but she was quickly put in her place. I didn't like that either. I can't even imagine a situation like this where the ex-husband and Lucy are so close. They practically live together. I'm trying to understand why Tim would want that. He married a young girl for the second time. Grandma Nancy's eyes bulged with horror. Oh, saints. Maybe they're in cahoots, plotting some kind of scam. Listen to this nonsense. Lucy had no more strength. She laughed merrily. Grandmothers, you'll end up calling the emergency services because of this. Simply because here, far away from civilized life, other customs reign. That's why you find it wild that ex-spouses are on friendly terms. And age has nothing to do with it. Grandpa Anthony is right. A mature man is much more reliable than a green youth. Both grandmothers simultaneously looked at her granddaughter, but said nothing. Only after the wedding, with undisguised sadness in her voice, said, Lucy, a strong man beside you. That's good, but often such people close themselves off from others. I'm very afraid you'll lose yourself, sitting in your husband's shadow. And I also want to tell you not to let this woman, you know who I'm talking about, commanding you in your own home. The girl knew her grandmother had a keen sense of foresight. She remembered the warning and tried to resist her husband's influence, but it didn't last long. The first line of defense collapsed when Tim demanded that his young wife quit her job a few months after the wedding. Lucy, I need a calm and loving Lucy. With your shifts and late-night commutes, that's not gonna happen. That's why I insist you quit your job. Lucy tried to object. Tim, I can't live without a job. I spent years studying to become a doctor. My parents also devoted themselves to this noble profession. The businessman wrinkled his nose in disgust. Lucy, this is getting unbearable. You're always talking in Soviet-era slogans. Your old folks really pumped you up. But times have changed now. You are my Lucy, and I am able to provide for you and our future children. The day after this conversation, Ariana showed up unannounced. From the expression on her face, Lucy realized that she had something to say to her. And that hunch was confirmed as they drank tea together. First, Tim informed her knowledgeably. I didn't want to tell you, Lucy, but our marriage to Tim broke up for many reasons. But chief among them was my reluctance to quit my job. At the time, I was just starting to get my career off the ground. I had a good position and a high salary. Plus, I had a son. You probably didn't know that Tim, as they say, took me in with child. Lucy looked at her interlocutor in surprise. No, I didn't know. I thought Robert was Tim's son. He even has a middle name. Ariana waved her hand carelessly. I insisted that my husband adopt the boy. Robert's father was not of good character, and he wasn't interested in his son from the start. Tim did his best to make sure the boy didn't lack parental love, and I'm very grateful to him for that. Then why did you get divorced if everything was fine? Ariana looked at Lucy strangely. You seem to be an educated girl, don't you understand? Tim really wanted to have a child of his own. Over the years, that desire became an obsession, and I got in the way of those plans. How? Very simply, I couldn't have any more babies, or rather, at first I didn't want to, because my career was more important to me. And then I was sure that one child was enough for complete family happiness. But one day my career collapsed. On top of this unpleasantness, I found out that previous miscarriages had made me infertile. Listening to the confessions of my husband's ex-wife, Jane, was not very pleasant, and she tried to avoid the subject. But apparently she decided to make light of the situation. When Jane and I met, he was like a helpless chick, and I was already a hawk. I had connections and money, and I willingly invested it in my husband, hoping to get something in return in time. That admission shocked the young woman. So Tim owes you everything, and that doesn't bother you at all? Not at all. Some people sell their souls to achieve their goals. Others work until the grave. It's up to each man to choose what's best for him. Lucy thought that this woman with her cynical attitude to life is terrible. In the evening, when her tired husband came home, she said, "Tim, if it's necessary for our family happiness, I'll quit my job at the clinic, especially since soon there will be an addition to our family. Just please don't say anything and leave." Her husband pulled her into his arms and spun her around in a dance. When the initial emotions had subsided a bit, Tim asked, "So why did you suddenly change your attitude towards your uncle?" Lucy replied, "Not all at once. It didn't happen all of a sudden. I didn't like that woman from the beginning. There is something mysterious and even sinister about her. I think you're exaggerating, though there's some truth in your observations. I myself have long been weighed down by this union, but unfortunately I can't do anything about it because you are a creation of your ex-wife." "I am right." The man sighed heavily. "Part of it was. The entire business, all the finances and real estate are registered in Arian's name. If I end our relationship, I'll be left with nothing. But then Ariana has a lot to lose, something like that. In short, she has all the paperwork, or rather her lawyer, who basically controls everything. Can't anything be changed?" "Not at the moment." "Oh yes, very clever and perceptive. She's thought of everything, and to make sure nothing happens that she can't control. She's got me under her control too, Tim. So I too have been controlled by your ex-wife against my will. Admit it, she encouraged you to marry me." The man looked away and coughed. It was a sign of confusion, but Lucy decided to press him. "Tim, don't be sarcastic. I repeat the question. I too am under Arian's control." Tim sighed helplessly. "I'm sorry, but it just happened. I didn't want to upset you, but before we got married, Ariana made me sign a document in which I turned over full control of the company to her. Just in case something happened. I hope you understand." "Oh my God, but it's like involuntary servitude." "Tim, let's go somewhere far away. You're smart and resourceful, and you can make your own life. I can and I will when the time comes." Lucy realized that there was a hidden meaning in her husband's words, that he had some plan, but she did not want to pester him with questions because she was tired of the intrigues in which she had to plunge after the wedding. Days and months flew by. Twins Billy and Steve were born on time and healthy. The happy father sat for hours under the maternity ward windows and acted like a little boy. Ariana didn't show up until the day the babies were discharged. The appearance of this woman spoiled the mood of Anthony's grandparents, who, despite his age and ailments, was eager to go to the capital. The old man regretfully noticed the appearance of this witch. It was a pity he had forgotten to put garlic in his pockets. "Oh yes," I heard the old man's remark, but only whispered back with slumbering ignorance. "I don't know what to talk about with such people." "You cursed root. What a lady we have here. You should mind your own business and stay out of other people's families. Why are you picking on the guy? As if he's your property. Serfdom was abolished a century and a half ago under the Tsar." Lucy later found out about the dispute. If she hadn't intervened, there would have been a fight outside the maternity ward. Her grandmother tried to calm the outraged intruder. She said as gently as she could, "Ariana, why did you come? Why are you disturbing people? Let your ex-husband live in peace. It's time to realize and accept that he is not your property. He is a free man." And she threw the bouquet of roses into the snow and muttered something unintelligible. I walked to the parking lot. I guess she expected Tim to run after her, but he didn't even move. Grandpa Anthony looked sadly at his son-in-law. "Be strong, my boy. Women like your Ariana do not forgive offenses. Don't you want to move to another town for a while? And don't leave an address." The couple decided to follow the old man's advice and soon settled in the apartment. Of course, this move was incomplete because Tim could not leave his business. He regularly traveled to the capital and often stayed there for several days. This arrangement suited Lucy, but when her grandmother died, the young woman realized that she could no longer stay in the apartment where everything reminded her of her loved one. She decided to sell the apartment as she was constantly busy with her children. She entrusted her husband with the task. They quickly found a new, more spacious apartment. Lucy again entrusted the transaction to her husband. The woman did not pay much attention to the fact that her husband registered the new apartment in his name. Only after almost 10 years she bitterly regretted her frivolous attitude to such important issues. Almost 12 years of married life flew by like a blink of an eye. During these years, the family has experienced both joys and sorrows. Lucy more than once thought of divorce, but now, after the tragedy, all the disagreements and disputes she considered unimportant trifles. The woman again felt the unfriendly gaze and looked toward Arian and Robert. Her stepson was literally drilling her with his gaze, and his mother was smiling hypocritically. The widow sensed something in those hostile glances that made her wary, for she had studied the character of her predecessor well enough. Ariana was clever and resourceful. She did nothing without reason. She was also a mysterious woman and loved ambiguity. Lucy remembered how in yesterday's phone conversation, she had specifically hinted at some circumstances that would change everything after the funeral. It made the girl tense up. All the rest of the day, she thought about her fate and the rival's shenanigans, and these thoughts did not give her peace even after the funeral service. Emotions overwhelmed her, and she herself did not notice how she said aloud, "That old witch, she's definitely up to some mischief. She smells like a skunk." As these unpleasant epithets were uttered rather loudly, Billy, the elder of the twins, became an unwilling witness to this passionate speech. "Mom, it's not nice to express yourself like that. And eavesdropping is a bad habit, too. You were yelling so loud it was impossible not to hear. I suppose Aunt Ariana finally got to you." "Billy, what kind of slang is that? I'm taking after you. Now all we have besides you is ourselves. Ariana doesn't count because she's not family." "Yeah, well, to be honest, my brother and I can't stand her." Lucy paused for a second and sighed. "I don't like her either." Lucy sank back into her thoughts while her son watched her absent-mindedly chopping cabbage. The woman thought sadly that her husband's death didn't seem to have affected the boys much. They took the sad news surprisingly calmly, and at the funeral, they didn't even shed a single tear. Of course, such indifference caused her mother surprise and fear. Lucy thought it was the perfect moment to point this fact out to her 10-year-old son. "Billy, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think your father's death made any impression on you or your brother." The boy looked into his mother's eyes and philosophically remarked, "Man is mortal, and we all find ourselves on the other side of reality sooner or later. Daddy didn't die, he just passed into another world." The woman hugged her child. "You've been reading a lot of nonsense and fantasizing. It's easy to talk about parallel worlds when you're not burdened with responsibilities." The son interrupted impatiently. "Do you think things will be different for us now?" "Of course, it's going to be very difficult without Daddy." In the kitchen, behind Steve's back. "Quiet. You guys were yelling so loud I heard everything." The boy walked around the table and approached his mother on the other side. "Mom, you don't even have to worry about the hardship. After all, Billy and I are here and can protect you. Daddy taught us that men are supposed to protect the weak and women, and Billy and I are real men. You are my protectors." The young mother's concern touched their hearts and tears ran down Lucy's cheeks as she hugged the boys. "I hope we won't be lost with you. It's too bad our grandparents aren't alive. We have no one. I can't even imagine what we will live on." Steve consoled his mother. "Now, legally, all the business and property will pass to us. We are the heirs." The boy wanted to add something else, but suddenly blurted out, "Billy, Steve, you're so naive. You forgot about Arian's aunt who ran away from Arian." Steve continued to chuckle, so no one would know about her. She got tangled up in her kimono. The boys exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Their mother had to scold them. "Children, I think you picked the wrong time to joke around. Have you forgotten that your father is dead?" Billy looked at her ingratiatingly. "We can't cry all the time. The funeral's over, and we all have a life to live. Believe me, Dad would have told you the same thing. Remember, he didn't like sour faces." Lucy smiled. "Yes, your father was a man of good cheer." The pleasant memories came flooding back into the woman's mind, and at that moment the phone rang. The twins exchanged glances, and Steve rushed to the door with an exclamation. "Surely that bloody aunt must have come to see us." Lucy hurried after her son into the hallway, where Ariana was already standing with a disgruntled look. "Lucy, You need to get down to the business of raising your sons. I'm sure Tim would not approve of this behavior. The guest grabbed Steve's arm and looked at him disapprovingly. Can you talk about adults like that? Who taught you bad language, boy? The boy jerked his hand away. And who taught you to grab other people's children? You have a son of your own? Then grab him. Lucy felt uncomfortable, though she was not pleased with the guest's appearance. Children, go to your room. We need to talk to Aunt Ariana. The twins wandered off and headed for the children's room. Ariana followed them with a scratchy look. The tomboys are like a cartoon, two peas in a pod. How will they live without their father now? It's okay. We'll get through this temporary hardship. Come into the kitchen. I am cooking and busy. The guest followed the hostess. For some time, both women were silent, but this pause resembled a preparation for a major battle. The young widow sensed that an unpleasant conversation awaited her. Ariana, you didn't come all this way just to talk about tea, did you? The guest giggled nervously. Well, I'm so cold I could use a cup of tea, if it's not too much trouble for you. Lucy endured her rival's piercing stare. What difficulty could there be with a pot of tea? I'm sure you didn't come here for a tea ceremony. You guessed correctly. In fact, I had hoped we would discuss things together the morning after the funeral, but you left so quickly, though a widow should stay until the end. I'm sorry, but I can't stand mourning and all these rituals since I was a child. The children were tired too and asked to go home. You could have warned me of your departure. Again, I'm sorry. Ariana waved her hand, warding off pesky insects. Okay, let's not dwell on such trivialities. Lucy, you can probably see why I made such a long journey, as you yourself just noticed, not for sport. Lucy turned off the gas and poured tea for her guests. Of course I understand. Just let's get straight to the point without further ado. Ariana took a small sip and closed her eyes. What a rich flavor, a real tea. By the way, not everyone can afford such a luxury. Even among my acquaintances, there are people who save on tea and drink all sorts of crap from low-quality raw materials. Lucy still didn't understand what the guests were getting at. My grandmother taught me to appreciate good tea. She herself was a fan of this noble beverage. Devotion to tradition. That's commendable, but times change, and one must sometimes adjust one's habits to fit them. This uncertainty began to irritate the young widow, and she asked irritably, Ariana, you traveled almost 200 kilometers just to talk about tea. The guest grumbled unhappily. My God, why are you getting so worked up? You always take everything so seriously. Can't we just talk peacefully about the future? Speak up, I'm listening to you carefully. I see you're not in the mood for a peaceful conversation. Good, then I'll have to give you the facts. Ariana opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. She threw the papers on the desk with irritation. Lucy was surprised and asked, Why the gestures? The woman remarked wryly. But didn't you ask me to speak without unnecessary verbal nonsense? These are the documents confirming that your late husband left you with nothing, or rather nothing. The plate slipped out of the young woman's hands and fell to the floor, breaking into small shards. The guest remarked indignantly, Why are you so careless? As if we don't have enough problems in our house. By the way, are you aware that this apartment is also not yours? Most likely, you know absolutely nothing about your husband. What should I know? And who can evict me from a place I bought with my money? Evict you. The bailiffs, unless you leave the property voluntarily. I can tell you one thing about Tim. He was a man with a hidden agenda. During our happy marriage, I noticed my husband taking money without asking. We had a joint account at the time. I didn't like it, so I decided to keep an eye on him. I thought he was flirting with other women, but it turned out to be much worse. He was gambling. Lucy felt her breathing become labored. She too had had similar suspicions, but her husband had laughed at her fears. With a sigh, she asked, Did he play computer games? Her rival laughed in her face. Lucy, well, what is that to boys? And Tim was a real man, so he played big, that is, in the stock market. He always dreamed of getting rich in one fell swoop and took risks without looking back. Many times I tried to cool him down, and he would calm down for a while. But then it started all over again. Lucy didn't want to believe what she was hearing. It couldn't be true. Tim couldn't have done this to us. You don't believe it? Look at these documents. They're promissory notes. Tim owes a lot of people, and I'm the one who's gonna have to clean up this mess. Ariana pulled one document out of a pile of papers. And here's the mortgage. Enjoy your apartment. Her heart first jumped to her throat, then dropped. Lucy desperately grabbed the back of the chair, but it couldn't be. I can't go outside in the middle of winter with 2 kids. Ariana was triumphant. She had managed to humiliate this peasant girl who thought she was important. For a few seconds, she enjoyed her young rival's confusion, but she wanted to humiliate her even more, and in the same submissive tone she suggested, "Lucy, don't be so despondent. Together we can find a way out of this impasse." Lucy raised her eyes full of despair. "But is there a way out? I don't just mean a way out of the impasse, but a solution." The guest jumped up from her chair and hugged like a mother. "There is. I can offer you and the children a place to stay in our country house. You remember Chicago. You must remember that marvelous place. It was in Chicago that you performed a professional feat when you saved Tim from certain death. I still marvel at your selfless act. I could not have done that." Lucy was tired of listening to her guest's enthusiastic speech, and she interrupted her abruptly. "Yes, I remember that village, but there is no school or hospital there, so it's not a suitable option for us." Ariana looked at her in surprise and narrowed her snake-like eyes. "Why? What's wrong with that? You'll have to look for a job, and there aren't any in the village." Lucy replied, "Ariana, I will not be your maid. You have such a great plan to make me your slave. It won't work. You can drown in your own anger, but it won't work. You have chosen the wrong man." The guest jumped up as if she'd been stung. "We'll see about that. You'll be begging bread at my feet. Do you think you can go back to your profession? You won't. I'll make conditions so bad you won't be able to find work, not even as a cleaner or laundress." Already at the door, Ariana shouted, "I'll give you a week to pack, and I don't want you breathing in this apartment." The door slammed and the guest disappeared. The only reminder of her rival's visit was the sickeningly sweet scent of her perfume. Lucy sat down on a chair and burst into tears. The twins crept into the kitchen and began to comfort their mother. "Mommy, don't cry, please. We will help you, and everything will be all right. We will do well in school." The boy's support calmed the woman down a bit. She smiled through her tears. "With such helpers, I won't be lost, and we have a place to get through the hard times, don't we?" Billy's eyes lit up. "You want me to tell you a fortune? We'll be staying at Grandma Nancy and Grandpa Anthony's house." "That's right. That's great. I like the village, and the guys there are nice. It's probably even better in the winter than in the summer." Although the woman wasn't sure of that statement, she didn't want to disappoint her son. "All right, guys, let's hope for the best. And to make sure we don't waste any time, let's start packing. Take only the essentials with you." Steve was disappointed with that stipulation. "So I can bring a construction kit? Does that mean toys aren't on the list of essentials?" The boy sighed sadly. "Can I bring books?" "Only the essentials." Steve muttered something to himself, but he didn't dare argue with his mother. They had 2 days to pack. Lucy wanted very much to spite her rival. After thinking about it, she decided to organize an urgent sale of furniture, dishes, and household appliances. Some of the things were bought by neighbors, and part of it she gave to a large family from a neighboring house, taking into account the proceeds. The widow was very pleased. "For a few months, we will lead a carefree existence, and then we'll see." She tried not to think about the future because the unknown frightened her. They spent the last night in an empty apartment. They had to sleep on the floor, but the boys, tired with excitement, paid no attention to the inconvenience. As soon as their heads touched the pillows, they fell asleep. And the widow, she enjoyed imagining Ariana boiling with indignation when she saw the completely empty apartment. The next morning, Lucy couldn't resist calling Ariana. "We've vacated the apartment. You can use it. I hope we don't owe you anything else." Radish shouted into the receiver. "Wait, don't hang up. I wanted to do something nice." Lucy disconnected the phone, then pulled out and snapped this SIM card. "I don't believe you, and I know for a fact that dangerous acquaintances should be cut off without hesitation." Of all the valuable possessions she could freely dispose of, there was the budget sit-in given to her by her elders for her 30th birthday. Of them she remembered with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you, my dear ones. Your gift is simply invaluable in this situation." It's a wonder Ariana hadn't gotten her hands on that car sooner. On her last night in the apartment where the happiest years had flown by, she thought of Tim. She was hurt that the husband she loved had allowed a complete stranger to run their family's life. The woman whispered all the way, "Where are you? Where are you? What have you done?" There was a moment when the image of her late husband appeared before her eyes. This vision did not frighten the widow, but on the contrary, pleased her. Tim looked guilty and smiled as if he wanted to say something in his own defense. Lucy, in her childhood and youth, she read a lot and was always amazed at how different authors described the moment of the hero's return to this homeland. There was no way she expected to feel excitement on the way to Colorado. The closer she got to her destination, the more anxious she became. It was a very strange feeling, for she had not been born in this place, not in a village among the forests, but in a city. Billy noticed his mother's anxiety. "Mom, well, why are you so nervous? Calm down, or we'll have an accident like this." Steve patted his brother on the head. "Shame on you. Remember what Grandma Nancy said? You can't say anything like that on the road. Mama's worried enough as it is. And you're just putting your own words in." But Billy could no longer be calmed. He decided to remind his older brother and warn him of the consequences of disobedience. "Remember how Grandma said you had a nail sticking out in one place? That's why you need to be watched. If you start being naughty, Mom and I will take you to the woods and leave you there." Steve only laughed and wasn't scared. "I feel at home in the woods. When we went camping as a class, Barbara told us how to behave in extreme situations to survive." Billy learned his lesson quickly. The travelers showed up when the whole class could be heroes. "I want to see you whimper with fear when you're alone." The brothers' faces burned with anger. They were ready to lash out at each other, but Mom, who was watching their argument in the mirror, warned them, "If you don't calm down now, I'll throw you both out of here, and then you'll have to walk to the village." The prospect of walking to the village, with man-high snowdrifts on both sides, dampened the quarrelsome fervor. The brothers made disgruntled faces and fell silent. The last time Lucy had been in the village was more than 2 years ago. She had come to visit the graves of her elders, to check on the condition of the house she had inherited, and to prevent her property from being taken over by fellow villagers and outsiders who were after other people's property. She asked Julianne, the paramedic's wife, to keep an eye on the house. The last time she knocked on the door of her acquaintance's house, Jacob himself came out to her. "Lucy, I'm glad to see you. You've come at just the right time. Are you interested in your house?" "Tim, did you find that strange?" "Who was interested?" "A very respectable man. He wants to have a summer house in an environmentally friendly place. So he liked Anthony's cabin and asked him to call if you were planning to sell the house." Jacob handed her a slip of an old receipt with a cell phone number scribbled on it. Lucy didn't even look at the note. "I don't even have thoughts like that. I'm asking you, if anyone asks you about this again, tell them the house isn't for sale." Jacob scratched his head and hid the note. "As you can imagine, I'd think about it if I were you. After all, the house needs care for the winter. The wood freezes, and then there's dampness and mold. It'll rot without proper care for your inheritance. And if you sold it, at least you'd make some money, right?" Lucy thanked the paramedic for the warning and asked him to take care of the property. Of course, she promised to pay him extra for this favor. The man happily agreed and asked for an upfront payment. Remembering the paramedic, the woman smiled. She regretted that she hadn't warned him of her arrival, but she was sure that everything was fine in the house. But when the car pulled up to Lucy's house, she was amazed to see. A path led from the gate to the porch, and a plump suitcase stood right at the doorstep. The woman jumped out of the car and ran toward the house. "What kind of trickery is this? Who is trying to move into someone else's house?" No one answered that question. The children also came to the scene, and Steve immediately grabbed the suitcase. Lucy yelled at her son not to touch it. There was no telling what was inside, and it was not customary to touch strange objects. Billy burst into laughter. "You're scaring yourself with an ordinary suitcase. Maybe someone forgot it or accidentally left it behind." The boy didn't have time to fully develop his theory, because a strange man wearing a hat with ears down was hurrying down the path toward the house. "This is my suitcase, children. Don't you dare touch anyone else's stuff." The twins were confused, and Lucy walked toward the stranger. "And who are you to make decisions on someone else's territory?" The man froze in place. I live here, or rather, I will live here. Lucy became aggressive. So you've decided you're going to live here. Did you decide that on your own? Well, I could easily report you to the authorities. The stranger started backing away. Woman, wait, don't yell. I don't understand why you're so upset. The landlord gave me the keys and I paid 6 months in advance. What landlord? This is my house. You see, good citizen, this is my house. And this whole area is legally mine too. Lucy made an expressive gesture with her hands and looked at the imposter. He realized that he was in an unpleasant situation and stumbled at half a word. You see, I had an extraordinary situation in life. I urgently needed a place to live outside the city. The woman smirked, but more calmly asked, "And why? Away from the city, there are probably problems with the law." The man stared at her. "Do you think I'm a criminal? You said yourself that you had to go into hiding." "I said nothing of the sort. You, madam, are the one making up stories as you go along. I am not your madam. Not only did you trespass, but you insulted me." "I didn't say anything insulting to you." As usual, Billy spoke up at the most crucial moment. "Uncle, don't yell at my mom." Steve joined his brother too and manfully squared his shoulders. "Do you think that if we don't have a father anymore, you can mistreat our mom?" The man glared at them and took 2 steps back, but stumbled. The stranger was tumbling around in the snow trying to get out of the trap, and the brothers laughed at his helplessness. The boys expected approval from their mother, but she looked at them sternly. "What do you want?" "Help the man get out instead." The stranger spoke up. "Thank you. I can handle the threats myself." The man stood on a narrow path covered with snow. "I was just heading that way. You could have at least said thank you." Lucy muttered, "I don't see the need for that. Take your suitcase and leave. I've got nowhere to go, and there's no money for a place to stay. I paid off my landlord yesterday, and today I brought my things here to pay him back. And then you came and attacked me." Lucy stepped back and burst into tears. The stranger approached her with a guilty look and patted her on the shoulder. "Don't cry, Lucy. I'll fix it." The woman, through her tears, said, "Dan Ryder, I knew it wouldn't end well. So you spent someone else's money." "Calm down. I didn't drink it. I bought useful equipment for my motorcycle," Jacob announced. But the news had the opposite effect on his weeping wife. "Steve, where's your equipment?" "There's something in our yard. I didn't realize it was there. I hid it in the shed for now." Julian went pale. "You found someone you can trust, and you're pushing him for a bottle. Oh dear people, what's going to happen now?" The hostess clutched her head and began to cry again. Jacob decided it was time to show his manhood. He shouted at his wife, "You will be all right too. Since you know everything, the tractor is coming." He looked pleadingly at Tim, "And I think we'll solve the tenant issue too. Lucy, in memory of our friendship, let this man stay. You have a spacious house. He will not disturb you." The young widow didn't like that suggestion. "Jacob, I can't. I have a family of my own." "Lucy, I'm begging you. I won't be in your debt. Besides, you're unemployed now." The woman nodded in agreement, and the paramedic was pleased. "But it'll work out here. They're already planning to write me off. I mean, they want to put me on a well-deserved retirement and the position will be vacated, so I can put in a good word for you." Lucy pondered. Jacob rubbed his hands together happily. "Well, I think we've come to an agreement. It would be good for Lucy to celebrate the deal." Julian had fully recovered from the shock. "She's decided to take her husband for a spin. I'll take care of the bill. Go to the neighbor's house and make sure the machinery is in the yard in 5 minutes." The guests had no choice but to leave on their own. The boys were silent the whole time while they were inside the house. But as soon as they went outside, they started discussing the exciting incident. "That guy is so funny. Yeah, he's great. His aunt used to hit him." "Mom, have you known them long?" Lucy smiled. "Yes, I interned here." "Jacob taught me," Steve asked. "Mom, are you going to be a doctor again?" "I don't know yet. It depends on how things go." Stranger always went alone, but when he heard the landlady talking to the children, he asked, "Maybe it won't work. As far as I know, there's an acute shortage of personnel in our medicine." "Yes, there is a problem, but the thing is, I've hardly ever worked in my field. I have a little over a year of experience, so now I can only count on a vacancy as a nurse and even then in the best case. What does it take to get reinstated? Courses and recertification. It's a lot of work. I didn't even realize medicine would be so strict. It's true. You know, our dean at the university said that medicine should be as disciplined as the military. And your dean is right. I'm sorry, Lucy, but don't you think it's strange that we had a fight and a reconciliation and we haven't been introduced? Victor. The twins watched with interest as the stranger shook their mother's hand. Steve nudged his brother. Look, let's slow down a little. Billy pulled over. Steve, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Whispered the boy as they walked. Well, I think it's all right, man. I didn't like him at first, though. Neither did I, but look at him now. The plump suitcase still stood proudly on the porch. The boys were happy. Yay. Nobody took it. Otherwise, we'd be in trouble. Lucy looked sternly at her sons, and Victor pretended not to hear the street slang. It was very cold in the house, and he asked cheerfully, Guys, why don't we light the stove? Billy immediately exclaimed, Yes, because it's such a clown in here. Steve, embarrassed, said, But we don't know how to light the stove. We always used to come here in the summer when it was warm. Grandma Nancy sometimes stoked the stove. She used to make us tea and pancakes. Remembering great-grandma's treats, Steve rolled his eyes and stuck out his tongue. He did it so expressively that Victor burst into laughter. It's okay. Guys, I'll teach you how to light the stove. My grandfather taught me that craft. Billy liked the relaxed conversation, and he became bolder. Uncle Victor, do you know how to make fishing rods? I sure do. I'll tell you a secret. I came here to raise fish. There are many small lakes and rivers in this area. If you organize the business correctly, the costs will quickly pay it off, and it will be good for the reservoirs. Lucy couldn't help but admire the trio sitting by the stove. From the outside, one could think that the father was teaching his sons a simple craft. A thought flashed through the woman's mind. Tim never talked to the children, so plain and simple, he was always in a hurry to get somewhere. The next day, the friendship between the twins and the tenant began to take new forms. The boys found old skis in the attic, and Victor patiently taught them how to handle this equipment. In the evening, problems with the wiring were discovered, and the tenant quickly solved this issue for the boys. The guys watched him closely and followed his every word. Lucy watched this idyllic scene and felt almost happy. Winter passed imperceptibly, replaced by spring, and then came the long-awaited summer. Life in the house of the young widow fell into its usual course. Lucy spent the whole day at the medical center. Her candidacy was gladly approved by the regional health department, and her little practical experience did not prevent it. Victor also cozily settled down on his side of the house. He diligently and without reminders fulfilled his male duties, and the twins followed him like puppies. In winter, the tenant brought a car from the city and sadly remarked, "Too bad you don't have a garage." Lucy seconded him. "I too am concerned about this circumstance. My car is very sensitive to change, and the weather has been unstable lately. Therefore, the children often have to walk to school, which is more than 2 kilometers one way." "Lucy, why didn't you tell me about this problem before? I can easily take the kids to school and check your car if you trust me." She looked into his eyes but saw nothing but a genuine desire to help. "Thank you. You'll be doing me a huge favor." The brothers were overjoyed, but when they found out they'd be driving around in a fancy car, Victor choked up with excitement. "Billy, imagine how surprised everyone's gonna be. This isn't your mom's ear that sneezes every 100 yards. Although it was unpleasant to hear such comments about her car, Lucy kept silent. She didn't want to admit to herself that Victor had quietly but firmly entered their lives. They lived together peacefully enough under the same roof, and the woman did not want to think that one day he would leave their home. Most likely, the apartment also thought about parting. One day at dinner, he said sadly, "You know, Lucy, my life has changed a lot these past few months. I lost my family a few years ago." Lucy and her daughter decided to take a ride to the zoo and got into an accident. Lucy died on the spot, and the doctors tried to save her daughter, but they couldn't. It was the first time a man had ever spoken so openly to her, and Lucy was taken aback. "I didn't know anything about your personal tragedy. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for your kind words. I know you've been bereaved recently too." the boys told me. Yes, my husband was killed in a stupid accident. It's a shame when a man wasn't even sick. He was always very active, but he slipped, fell, and that was it. Misfortune always comes unexpectedly. I thought I wouldn't survive, but my friends and work helped me. In my free time, I develop programs and travel. I like fishing. There is a lake nearby. I went to rent it for about 3 years. Fish farming is a very profitable business. I didn't know you could rent a lake. I always thought rivers and lakes were public places. They used to be. But today you can take temporary possession of such a natural object. By the way, it is very useful for ecology because the lessee is obliged to keep order and follow a whole list of rules. If you are interested, I can organize a tour for you. The adults thought that the children were engrossed in their work, but after learning about the exciting trip, the brothers shouted in one voice, "Uncle Victor, we really want to see your lake. Take us with you." Lucy felt embarrassed by her son's behavior and tried to calm them down. "Boys, you can't be so pushy. The man hasn't finished talking, and you're already pouncing on him." Victor was apparently pleased with the boys' interest. He winked at them enigmatically. "Are you ready? But let's agree that you won't be naughty and won't touch anything." The twins solemnly promised to obey their guide. But as it turned out, trusting their promises was an unforgivable mistake. When they came to a lake hidden deep in the forest, Victor said, "Wait here for a while, I'll lock the car, and then we'll all go to the lake together." But Steve was bursting with impatience. He broke free and jumped onto the steep, treacherous shore. The boy forgot caution and slipped down. Lucy shouted to Steve, "My God, he can't swim." Billy rushed to save his brother. "I can swim. They taught us in gym class." Victor was already quickly undressing and putting on his shoes. He looked at Billy sternly. "And you just stand there like we don't need you to save us." It all happened in a matter of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity to Lucy. She had a bad feeling. She was afraid to move, and she was scared to look toward the lake, until Billy screamed, "Mommy, calm down. Steve's alive. Uncle Victor saved him." A minute later, Victor came to shore. He was carrying Steve in his arms. The boy was conscious, but frightened, either because he'd almost died or because he was about to meet his mother. Lucy took a few steps toward them and couldn't move. She slowly sank to the ground and began to cry. Billy stood nearby, confused. Mommy rarely cried. It was like this. I never hide from them at all. Victor set Steve down beside him and sat down on the ground himself. He didn't know what to do now, so he decided to just wait. Any tears had to end at some point. Steve put his hand on his mother's arm. "Mom, please don't scold me. Just don't cry." Half an hour later, when everyone had rested and calmed down a bit, they headed towards the house. Victor said, "That's all right. I'll tell you about my plans at dinner." The evening went wonderfully. Lucy cooked the meat. She hadn't cooked anything festive for a long time. Victor brought a bottle of expensive wine, put it on the table and said, "Let's celebrate today's event. After all, Steve now has 2 birthdays." And then he began to tell about his plans. The boys listened with their mouths open. Only Billy asked one day, "How do you know all this about fish, about what they like and don't like?" Victor smiled. "You see, Billy, before you start any business, you have to learn everything about it. Otherwise, it's no good." "No. Of course, you can figure it out as you go along, but then you're not immune to mistakes. This can slow down development and eventually ruin the project." Here is a person was looking for a suitable example and suddenly lifted a finger. For example, a person wants to learn how to ride a bicycle, sits down and falls. And another person first asks someone who has been riding for a long time how to keep his balance, how to properly press the pedals, how to brake. And only then does he get on the bike, and, oh miracle, he starts riding. Steve suddenly laughed. Billy blushed. Lucy tried to hide a smile. Victor didn't know that Billy had been trying unsuccessfully for a week to learn to ride the old bicycle he found in the barn. Victor looked at the boys in surprise, then smiled and asked, "Did I really hit the mark when Steve was explaining?" The man said, smiling, "I'll try to teach you tomorrow. There's nothing difficult about it." Billy snorted skeptically. "Of course it's nothing hard." "Well, you see, but you'll have to be fully rested for that. So finish your dinner and set it up." There was no need to persuade the boys. By the evening in the village, they were so tired they were ready to fall asleep at the table, plus the shock of the day. Victor, I won't ask if you need help. Victor helped clear the table. She felt strangely calm, peaceful, as if this was how it should be. Exactly like this. Lucy shook her head, pushing the strange thought away. Then she looked at Victor. Maybe Grandma's specialty tea. Victor immediately nodded at the tea. That would be just wonderful. And let's enjoy this wonderful evening outdoors. They sat down on the bench that Grandpa had made and drank tea in silence. Lucy realized that Victor wanted to say something, but she didn't understand what. But this unfinished thought frightened her for some reason. Lucy. Yes, she turned to him quickly. Victor was silent for a few minutes, picking up the words. I should probably go. I've taken shameless advantage of your hospitality, even though you don't have to tolerate my presence. After all, this is all from Jacob's motorcycle blog. By the way, if he wasn't in trouble, how was his moto? The blog does exist. Lucy smiled first. You know it does, yes. I met his wife recently and she's very happy. She says Billy spends so much time on new technology that he even forgets to drink. Victor laughed. Well, I guess we should forgive him then. Lucy suddenly became serious. You know, Victor, I've been waiting for this conversation. I don't know why, but I was sure it would happen. You're an honest man, but I have to thank you for living with us. First of all, you do all the men's work around the house. Honestly, I don't know how we'd manage without your help. Secondly, the boys catch every word you say, and I know you're not gonna teach them anything bad. Third, we feel very safe with you around. So what should we do? Lucy shrugged her shoulders. We have enough space. Why look for something else? You can continue to live with us, unless you have other plans, of course. Victor looked at Lucy carefully, as if expecting her to say something else, but Lucy looked at her feet. Okay, Lucy, thank you. I'll think about it. The next day, Lucy sat in her medical office. Summer is a hot time in the village, and there were far fewer patients. Either everyone had forgotten about their ailments, or they just didn't have the time. In any case, only 2 or 3 people had come to see her in the last few days. She perked up when she heard someone enter. You're settling in quite nicely, I see. Lucy looked in surprise at Robert, Arian's son. What are you doing here? Robert sat down on a chair next to the table. What's wrong with you? Could it be that I'm sick, and you greet me so unfriendly? Lucy suddenly realized that she felt no emotion, no hatred, no fear, no feeling of a beaten dog that she felt in the presence of Arian herself or in the presence of her son. She smiled. People like you don't get sick. Robert looked at her in amazement. Wow, have you changed? What can I do for you? Robert looked at Lucy thoughtfully. It looked like it wasn't going to be as easy as his mother had promised. The thing is, some circumstances have come to light. Arian's ex-husband and his adoptive father were not what they all thought they were. At first, there were no questions at all. Everything went to the mother as it should. Then it suddenly became clear that it wasn't that simple. Part of the business, which was registered to Tim, the apartment, which was also registered to him, were written down on the children. And he was doing it secretly from Ariane, although she was sure that she knew everything Tim was doing. Since it was done by a completely different notary, they didn't know about it right away, though Ariane had a hunch. Tim was paying too much attention to this Lucy, even though he had originally married her only so that she would bear him a child. And he realized that the less intimacy between them, the safer, the easier it was for her to control Tim. It was precisely because the woman had some suspicions that she didn't want to let Lucy out of her sight. One thing she wasn't wrong about, Lucy didn't fight for anything, though she could have. After all, they had the money to buy an apartment, they had children together. Now that new circumstances had come to light, something had to be done immediately, because Robert was living in the apartment, so Ariana sent her son. You have to get her to sign the papers. Mom, but I don't know, scare her. Think of something. I can't do everything forever. No one can disobey her, not even Robert. But to be honest, he was expecting a slightly different encounter. Anyway, he and his mother thought there wouldn't be a problem. Yes, he was in the neighborhood and he'll probably stop by. I came to rest at the cottage. Lucy stood up. If I'm not mistaken, I can't leave you. Robert was tired too. He walked over to Lucy and looked mockingly into her eyes. And Lucy suddenly realized that she was really scared. He had shown up here for a reason. Robert reached for her chin and Lucy flinched. He tried to catch her, but she grabbed the chair in her hand. "Go away." Robert walked away satisfied. After all, she's afraid of him, and that's a good thing. In the evening, Victor does something with the boys in the yard. Lucy, having finished her chores, also went out and sat on a bench. And so she froze, staring at one point. She did not see that Victor was looking at her intently. When the boys went to bed, he came into the kitchen. "Lucy, what's wrong?" She shuddered, then sat down at the table and began to tell him. Victor listened attentively to the unhappy woman's confession. Sometimes he nodded his head and did not understand how she tolerated it all. "Why do you think he came?" Lucy shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know. I can't even guess." Victor thought for a moment. From his experience, he realized that not much time had passed since her husband's death, so this visit could not be just a courtesy visit. Most likely some new circumstances had come to light. He was planning to go to town in a couple of days to finalize the deed to the reservoir and decided to drop in on his familiar notary for a cup of tea to see if he knew anything. A week went by. Victor had gone to town for a few days, and Lucy missed him terribly. She was afraid to admit it to herself. She realized that she had become too attached to her lodger. Lucy was approaching the house when she saw a strange car at the gate. Her heart jumped, and she quickened her step, for she thought it was Robert. He was sitting at the head of the table, and the boys were huddled on the couch. "What are you doing here? Who invited you?" Robert raised his hands playfully. "Are you scolding me? Why are you scolding me? I came to visit the boys' relatives, and it turns out they don't consider me their brother. They don't consider you their brother, and you know it. Leave immediately." Robert's eyes narrowed unfriendly. "We need to talk, Lucy. We have nothing to talk about." "You're mistaken. We have a lot to talk about. Shall we talk here, or shall we go out in the yard?" Lucy saw that the boys were very frightened and pointed to the door. "Let's go outside." Robert went outside, waited for her, and started talking right away. "So, my dad, your husband messed up something before he died, and it needs to be fixed, and then I'll leave you alone." Lucy felt a pounding in her temples. "What's this got to do with me? I didn't interfere in my husband's affairs. And anyway, what can you say about a man who abandoned his own children?" "Well, you were supposed to make sure your husband stayed out of other people's business." Lucy smiled. "Let's get down to business. You need to sign some papers." "I'm not signing anything. I have nothing to do with my husband's business or yours." "Oh, Mommy." Lucy turned to leave the house, but Robert grabbed her arm and squeezed it painfully. "Will you sign this?" "Let go. It hurts." "It'll hurt more, I promise you." He barely had time to speak before he was gone. Lucy only then heard him scream. Victor was standing next to her, rubbing her arm. "If I see you here again, I'll break your arms and legs." He and his mother were good psychologists. They could crush anyone weaker than them. But against Robert's physical strength, they were always at a disadvantage. "Lucy, we need to go to town right away. Get all the papers and let's go." "There's no time to explain. I'll explain everything on the way." Lucy wanted to ask something, but then quickly went into the house. 20 minutes later, they were on their way. Victor explained that by a happy coincidence, his friend was the very notary at whom Tim had secretly drawn up the documents with his first wife. And he'd agreed to stay late at work so that Victor could bring Lucy. She even cried a little, not such a bad man. Her husband was there for her. Apparently, somewhere in the depths of his soul, he still had something human. An hour later, they were in the city, and 2 hours later, they were there. Lucy was given the documents for her own apartment and some other papers, which she did not understand at all. It would all be sorted out later. "Now let's go to the store, get some good wine, and go home. We'll celebrate two things at once." The boys jumped in the back seat. "Yay, a party! What about the kebabs?" Victor waved his hand. "And the kebabs too." Lucy, still not fully recovered, looked at Victor carefully. He seemed too excited. It was unusual to see calm Victor in such a state. When the meat was already roasted, all the glasses were filled, and the boys were playing on the grass outside the house waiting for dinner. Lucy asked quietly. Is something wrong? Victor smiled. You've studied me well. It's nothing special. It's just that I'm always uncomfortable. When a dream is shattered, I've been denied a lease, or rather, they set a price I have to pay up front, and it's too high. I have money, but not that much, so the idea of fish farming is out. But how come? They promised. Everything was almost ready, he shrugged. I gather someone else liked the idea, but I have to deny myself to make it look right. That's why this change, but it's not fair. Life isn't always fair. So shall we say goodbye? I'm going into town in the morning. Lucy looked at him and realized she felt like crying. She didn't want him to go. The boys were silent too. They sat across from each other and looked at their mother and Victor. Well, are you sad? Lucy did not sleep. She tossed and turned for a long time, then got up and went out on the porch. When she heard footsteps behind her, she was not frightened at all. A man's hands rested on her shoulders, and Lucy turned around to find herself in Victor's strong arms. She'd been waiting for this, and he'd been dreaming of it. He knew it would be even harder for him to leave. He knew he shouldn't do this, but there was nothing he could do. Ever since he closed his eyes, he couldn't sleep. So when he heard Lucy go outside, he immediately got out of bed. In the morning, the boys looked at a sad mom and an overly cheerful Victor. Did Mom do anything to make him stay? Victor didn't understand what to do at all. Even yesterday, if something like this had happened, he would have stayed without hesitation. But now that Lucy was a wealthy woman, she had an apartment, she was doing fine on her own. Why would she want to lose her like him? He gathered up all his things and carried them to the car. Lucy sat silently in a chair. The boys settled down on the couch. They did not understand why things could not remain as before. The events of the last few days were completely incomprehensible to them. They realized that they could go home now, but they didn't want to. It was much better here. They really liked living together with Victor. He entered and stopped on the threshold. Well, let's say goodbye. Billy and Steve ran up to him and hugged him. Uncle Victor, can't you stay? Well, maybe we can work something out. If I could think of something, I would, because my savings are about to run out. And then what? I can't be your freeloader. Victor, you're a man. He smiled. Maybe God will provide something else. Lucy got up and came to him, looked into his eyes. Victor, if there was an investor who wanted to invest in your business, would it make a difference? He smiled. It would change everything. I'm sure he wouldn't regret it. Lucy looked at the guys, then said decisively, the guys and I want to be your investors. Victor's eyes widened. How could that be possible? The boys smiled. Now they understood why their mom had asked them today if they wanted to stay here for a while or go back to the city, and they declared that they wanted to live here, but not alone, but with Victor. Anyway, we decided that we're not ready to go back to the city yet, and we want to live here. We could sell the apartment, invest the money in a business, and then, if the business is profitable, we will definitely buy something. Victor sat up in confusion, but Lucy smiled and for the first time in front of the children addressed him without her middle name. Victor, stay. We will miss you very much. He stood up, looked at Lucy for a long time, then said, Then I have a favor to ask. Lucy, marry me. I honestly don't know if I would have had the strength to leave today or not. I didn't have to sell the apartment. Ariana broke free and demanded that she get back the part of the business that Tim had fraudulently taken from her. Lucy didn't hesitate to name a price, and then she stopped talking half-heartedly. She looked at Lucy carefully and, realizing that she was wrong, agreed. A year later, a little princess appeared in the family, and her happy father, and already a successful businessman, bought all the balloons in the neighborhood. But that's another story. How cold is it? Curled up in a ball. It didn't get any warmer. Some kind of terrible dream. It's cold to breathe, hard to lie down. Open my eyes and realize why I'm so uncomfortable. I have to wake up, open my eyes. Wake up, open my eyes. No. I dreamed I woke up in some sticky slime I can't get out of. Like a swamp that sucks you in, and if you don't wake up, you'll die drowned. It's hanging over my head, swamp sludge, and you'll stay in this terrible cold dream. Voices and silhouettes swirl around, someone walking, whispering, kneeling. She tries to raise her hand and push these visions away, but her hand won't rise. I need to remember some kind of prayer, How can I remember if I never knew? I need to wake up. Right now, immediately, I need to wake up and open my eyes. Nanny, opening her eyes, neither. She opened, now definitely open, across the street. Some kind of light square. It was light outside the window, so it was daytime. Nanny was lying on the floor in a small room with dark walls. She tried to move and get up, but it didn't work very well, hitting her elbow on something iron, some kind of barrel, something like a stove, arms and legs in a seesaw with many angles. It was very painful. Nanny moved her fingers to get the blood flowing faster. After 5 minutes, she rolled onto her side. Rising to her knees, she began to look around. Some kind of small but sturdy house. Dark, with smoky walls, 2 shelves. A table with legs, neatly folded blankets or mattresses lying against the wall. A furry coat hanging on a nail. It looked warm. She stood up on cotton legs. No, she couldn't stand. She crouched on all fours. Reached the wall, took the coat off the nail. Crawled into it like a tent. First to get warm, then to think. Where am I and how did I get here? She couldn't stay in the coat long. The acrid odor made her poke her head out. It's cold. But since there was a stove, there must be wood in the corner. Theoretically, how to heat the stove? It's clear in practice. If it doesn't work the first time, matches are found on the shelf. Wood is there too. That's all. And the result is 0. It doesn't ignite, although the result is there. While igniting, thinking, getting angry, finally it caught fire. Finally, since it was a stove bourgeoisie, it is warm, especially if you lean against it. Now she wants something. Surely there must be some food in here. On the shelf were cans of canned food, stew, beef porridge, some cans without labels. What's inside is a mystery. Nanny found salt, tea, a smoked wok, 2 spoons, and a knife. Hot tea. By the way, where can I get water? Oh, there are snowdrifts outside the door. She took the kettle and went down the stairs. Her legs wouldn't obey her. Her coat wouldn't stick to the steps. She took off her coat, rolled down, scooped up some snow. Now she had to climb back up somehow. First, she got the pot out. Then with an effort, she dragged her coat in and closed the door. Nanny put the pot of porridge and the pot of snow on the stove and went back to her coat and began to remember how she had gotten here. What was there to remember? First of all, she must find a way out. Now she will sit by the stove for a while and then think about what to do. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Nanny. She didn't like her name. Her mother and sister started calling her Nanny, so she got used to it. When Nanny was 13, her family moved to a different neighborhood and Nanny moved to a new school. She was an amazingly natural blonde with blue eyes, short in height, with a slim figure. All of her classmates and fellow students. Later, colleagues inevitably fell in love with Nanny and were invariably rejected. She did not consider herself beautiful and was sure that no one could love her. She was afraid to appear ridiculous in any company, sat on the sidelines silent. It seemed that if she said something stupid, everyone would realize what a fool she was. How did her parents manage to instill in a girl with such looks a sense of inferiority? The subject of a doctoral dissertation in psychology. Nanny studied quite well, getting C's in physics, chemistry, and algebra. But she always got A's in her literature essays. Her language teacher gave her an assignment to write a fairy tale. She sent it to contests and Olympiads, and then proudly showed the class the certificates and cups. Nanny's only friend was Sabrina. That's what they called the Little Round Street Tartars. Sabrina was very smart, top of the class in math. A genius in astronomy, her astronomy teacher didn't mess around with her. She realized she was no match for her. Sabrina wanted to be an astronomer. She talked about the stars nonstop. She infected Nanny with her passion. At night, they would climb onto the flat roofs of 5-story buildings, lie down, look up at the dark starry sky, and Sabrina would tell them about the stars and constellations. And in the winter, they skied all weekend along the banks of the Snake River. In the summer, they swam in the same river all day long. And then there was ice skating, dancing, music school, and more, just like in the nursery rhymes. Drama class, photography class. I also want to sing. The volleyball coach could barely contain his laughter when 2 runaways came to him who really wanted to play on the school volleyball team. He took them on, even held a couple practices. But Nanny got hit in the head with a hard ball, and that was the end of volleyball. In her senior year of high school, Sabrina decided that Nanny couldn't have a C in math on her diploma. It was incomprehensible how she couldn't solve such simple problems. Nanny tried to explain that it was very complicated, nothing could be fixed. But Sabrina objected. I can do anything. Even teach that fool who hasn't studied algebra since 6th grade. She gets C's and that's it. I'll bring her up to 10th grade in a week. I'm a humanitarian. I don't need math for anything. Do you need good grades on your diploma? Wouldn't you like an extra A? Girl, you're out of your mind. What A? I'm gonna get a C anyway. And Tony doesn't even know me. Tony, the math teacher, thought he should only work with people who understood math. The rest of us got C's and were never called to the board. Why not? The lessons went like this. 5 people solve problems and answer questions. The rest sit quietly and get C's for it. Questionable pedagogy, but it suited everyone. Sabrina explained everything so easily that soon Nanny could easily solve problems and prove theorems. But Tony was faithful to the principle of not wasting energy and time on untalented students. He still did not notice Nanny, who was eager to demonstrate her street Petersburg talents. She decided to go for it. Tony, why don't you ever call Nanny to the board? I tutor her. She understands math. She can solve any problem. Sabrina, you're a smart girl. I don't doubt your talents. But I've been teaching your class for 5 years, and your friend has never solved a single problem or written a single test. You want me to believe that she's suddenly gotten smart and discovered a talent for math. All right, fine. I'll call her next period. I don't want to turn it into a circus, though. The whole class was excited. It's gonna be fun. Nanny came out, quickly corrected the mistake, and calmly and clearly finished the solution. Sabrina squealed. Tony looked interested. Nanny had become one of those students for whom math was not a matter of indifference. She had A's in algebra and geometry on her high school diploma. They were removed, and everything became clear. She wanted to be an astronomer and nothing else, so she enrolled at New York University. Nanny had no way of deciding what she wanted to do. Medical and technical schools were out of the question. First of all, it was not her business at all. Secondly, there was stiff competition with her C's in physics and chemistry. Economics and law also did not attract. The Pedagogical Institute remained. There was no dream of becoming a teacher. Well, at least there was a favorite literature and a real opportunity to enter. Surprisingly, the study turned out to be interesting and easy. By the end of the first year, there were only the highest marks. True, there was one disadvantage. It was called Old Slavonic language. This subject was not even put on the exams. You just had to pass it. The only consolation was that it wasn't just Nanny who was stupid. No one passed. The teacher of Old Slavonic was a very colorful person. A large, chiseled woman with a stern expression and a low, steady voice that sent shivers down her spine. At her first lecture, Mady announced that she was the only one who knew Old Slavonic. She's the only one who gets a B. The others get either D's or C's. But to get a C, you have to try really hard. Only 2 people passed the exam on the first try and the same number on the second. The rest have been retaking the exam for months. Mady gave 3 attempts to pass the exam, and since only a few succeeded, the rest of the students went on to take Old Slavic as freshmen in September. To say they didn't like her would be an understatement. One day, a group of exhausted students subscribed to a specialized magazine for pig farmers, Pig Farming, and Mady received 15 copies of this love magazine every 3 months. There was an anecdote about her among the students. A son comes home tired and dirty. The mother asks, "Where have you been?" Mady was being buried. "But why are you so dirty?" "She's been buried 3 times. At the end of June, 4 friends, including Nanny, showed up for their 3rd retake. The first brave ones were already sitting in the auditorium, while the friends hesitated outside the door. Betty's friend had already swallowed valerian, but she was still shaking. The first students who hadn't passed began to leave. Surprisingly, no one else showed up. "We should go in," Betty said. "Let's not go either. We're not going to pass anyway. And really, why bother? Let's go to the beach." Fortunately, the institute was located on the main street of the city. The embankments and beaches were within walking distance. They had a great time. and on the way back, they stopped by the institute to see how things were going. Near the auditorium, they were caught by the secretary of the educational department. "Where are you chatting? Hurry up for the exam." "Yes, we'll take it in the fall." "Hurry up and pass." All four of them passed the exam. It turned out that except for the 5 who came first and didn't pass, no one else came to leave the exam, and almost the entire course wasn't graded. It was too much even for Matey. The dean was furious, and the secretary was running around the institute, fishing out random freshmen and forcing them to take the damn old Slavic exam. What was that all about? The stove was getting cold. She couldn't wait for tea. She got out of her cozy coat, tossed some wood into the stove. She could have gone ice skating, but she didn't want to leave the warm stove. She climbed back into her coat, leaned against the stove, and continued to reminisce. There must have been something in her life that had brought her to this house. Like that summer, 2 years later, Anna had come to visit her parents. They spent a lot of time together, telling each other about college life. There had been a big change in Sabrina's life. She had a fiancé. His name was Sam, also a future astronomer. His parents had moved to Germany, and Sabrina and Sam planned to move there after graduation. "Nanny, in 2 weeks we're going camping in Las Vegas in California. We want to go to Gallatin. Come with us." A real backpacking trip. We do that every vacation. We have our own hiking group. We plan the route, get ready and go. When I left, everything was ready. All that was left was to buy groceries. True, this time there are only 8 of us. Would you like to join us? You're all experienced, and I've never been on a hike like this. I won't be a burden. It's just a normal hike, no extremes. Come on, you won't regret it. It was so exciting. Nanny was a sporty girl. She skied, swam, but she never had to carry a heavy backpack all day. She had never cooked dinner over a campfire, slept in a tent under century-old pine trees, or been to a bee farm where a young bearded beekeeper treated them to honey and let them taste mead. She had never sat at sunset on the steep bank of the Gallatin, watching the passing ships. She promised herself then that she would definitely go on such a trip someday. And so she did. One day while on vacation, she went to Canada. As part of a group, she went over the mountains, but it was serious back then. First, they were trained at the campground, and when they crossed the mountains and got there, they were given certificates and tourist badges. But now Nanny was amazed by the forests, flowers, mushrooms, and berries of Miami. In her native land there were forests, of course, but not as monumental. It was mostly steppe with long waves. It was a little annoying that all the young men in the group were hanging around Nanny, as always, trying to impress her. Even Sam looked interested. Of course, that ticked off the girls. They were whispering, squinting at Nanny. The hike had stopped being fun and interesting. And to keep things from escalating, Nanny decided to choose a partner. It was Anthony, a future physicist. None of the girls seemed interested in him. No one crossed the path of this beautiful and brave girl. Besides, he was genuine, thorough, calm, and importantly, silent. With him, it was comfortable to walk along the trail, sit quietly by the fire, and most importantly, just silent and cozy. Slowly, everyone fell behind, stopped hissing and getting angry. The conflict subsided before it even began. Back in Washington, they lived in the university dormitory for a couple more days. Fortunately, it was vacation time, and there were plenty of rooms available. They walked around the city in droves, spending nights at clubs and beaches. They couldn't wait to break up, but they had homes waiting for them. It was time to leave. Here, Nanny realized once again that she was impossible, a white crow who lived in her own world and did not notice what was going on in other people's souls. She believed that Anthony had helped her and smoothed out the awkward situation. They enjoyed their time together. She liked him, of course. Such a grounded, dependable, and handsome guy couldn't help but like him. That was all. Maybe they'd meet again someday. But Anthony had fallen in love. On the day he left, he asked Nanny to come with him. "Come with me. I'll introduce you to my parents like you introduced me to yours." "Why? With your parents?" "Nanny, I love you. I want you to be my wife." "Wait, Anthony, it doesn't work that way. We've known each other for less than a month. You can't get married like that. You're a good guy. It's just not right. Of course, it's all wrong. Where's the candy bouquet, the courtship period? Then you have to date for a year and a half, then try living together. How can you get married without a family rehearsal? And then you can get married if you don't get bored of each other during that time. I don't have that kind of time. I'm leaving now. You go to your room. What if we never meet again? Will you regret it? I know for a fact that if I let you go, I'll never forgive myself. You may not believe that, but I don't think I'll ever meet a man like you. Of course, Nanny didn't go anywhere with him, and he was right. For 10 years, Nanny thought of Anthony many times. She berated herself for not giving herself and him a chance to be happy. When she was especially sad, she cried into her pillow and imagined pictures of a possible happy life with Anthony. It seemed that if she hadn't been scared then, she would now be living with the husband she loved and a couple of cute kids. She imagined him pining for her, waiting and searching for her. Though she realized that he was probably already happily married and had forgotten about some Nanny from his student days. Especially since he couldn't even look for her, he didn't even know where she came from. She had been so frightened by his revelations back then that she had simply run away, leaving no phone number or address. But she could still dream. If the story with Anthony was unexpected but understandable, Sam's sudden revelations finally shattered Nanny's faith in male decency. He showed up as soon as Anthony left. "Our macho man left. I know what you mean. You attached a lawsuit to it so as not to escalate the situation. But now we can talk." "Sam, I don't know what you're talking about. You understand the lyrics. The girl is smart, decent, will probably be a faithful wife and a good mother, even though she's a Tatar, but just an example of a real German wife. But there are a lot of them out there, and I need my wife to be incomparable. I need a wife I can proudly boast about, like you, beautiful and modest. My parents have already found me a job and planned a nice house. A prosperous life awaits us with the opportunity to travel the world. We just need to learn the language and learn how to run a household according to German rules." This is where Nanny got scared. She didn't need Sam with his German and his calculating network. What if Sabrina found out and lost her friend to some self-righteous jerk? She didn't see that coming. He'd already calculated everything, arranged everything. It never occurred to him that anyone could refuse him. How did this happiness come about? Sam noticed. A superior race, an incomplete prince. I can't wait to get him out of the room without, God forbid, anyone seeing him. Damn it. I wonder if she heard anything. Even if she hasn't, the situation is delicate. Her almost husband is in her friend's room for some reason. It's awkward, and more importantly, there's nothing to say. You can't tell the truth. Good thing she couldn't stay in the hostel for a few more hours. Nanny felt guilty. It was unclear why Sabrina was silent, but she looked wary. She probably regretted inviting her friend over. Could she be getting revenge? No, that's impossible. Nanny never saw her friend again, but she met her mother, Aunt Angelique. She told her that Sabrina and Sam had gone to Germany. They had 2 kids, so everything worked out the way it should. No need for revenge. No need to try to destroy the friend who once liked her future husband. Stupid for pragmatic Sabrina. And problematic, given the distance. Nanny tossed some wood into the stove. She figured she'd have to look for more wood tomorrow since they were running low. Now it was time to go to bed. Maybe the morning would be no more difficult than the evening, but she must try. Maybe in the morning everything would be clear and understandable. There was a reason that proverb was invented. She didn't bother Katie. Why not? It's not softer, it's colder. She dragged the blanket, placing it now and then on the floor, then on the headboard of the stove, tangling herself in her familiar coat. Her head ached, her arms, her legs. In short, everything that could hurt. Nanny realized she was in the home of a hunter or a woodsman. If there was food and firewood, someone must come here occasionally. But suddenly no one came for months. We had to look for a way out. But with snow up to your waist, which way to go? It's not clear. The prospects are not good, either to freeze or first get lost and then freeze. She can't take her darling with her. She'll have to sit here another day, wait for her arms and legs to stop hurting so much. And then she'll have to figure something out. She can't spend the winter here. I wonder if anyone is looking for her. Has anyone realized she's disappeared? Well, at least the workplace should be worried. Where did she go? Nannying the girl? Sleep would probably be impossible for her. The thoughts in her head were jumping around like frogs. inexplicably coming from nowhere and trying to outshine each other. The forest beyond the wall still rustles, some of the sounds hallucinatory. It seems as if someone is wandering here, either a beast or a forest spirit, or maybe the brigands have come to check if she's dead or not. If not, maybe they can help. Maybe they've been ordered to find her and finish her off. She thought she wouldn't fall asleep, but at some point the thoughts ran out and Nanny fell asleep. This dream was not much different from reality. Dark, cold, she stood alone in a long corridor from which there was only one way forward. Ahead of her, in a bright circle of light, as if from a lantern, stands her institute friend Betty. She waves her arms and shouts something, as if to warn her. Nanny hears nothing, but she is scared. She runs to Betty faster and faster. She gasps, tries to scream. But as so often happens in dreams, no scream is heard, and no matter how hard she runs, she doesn't move. The lights go out. Betty is gone. Nanny was left alone again in total darkness. And then she heard the crunch of snow. No, it wasn't a dream. Nanny opened her eyes. The darkness was not as impenetrable as it had been in the dream. Light illuminated the black wall, the forest, the sky, the window, but the snow was crunching. Someone was standing right in front of the porch. Nanny crawled quietly out from under her coat, took a log from the stove, and stood outside the door. Her heart was ready to jump out. Someone was already coming up the stairs. The door swung open. Nanny swayed, closed her eyes, and kicked. Someone groaned. Nanny dropped the log. It fell on her foot, and she cried out and opened her eyes. In the semi-darkness, it looked like something big and furry was standing across the room, but not a bear. A bear wouldn't have groaned. Wow, that's quite a greeting. Why are you doing this to me? I thought the bandits were here. Nanny sang out. The voice disappeared, probably from fear, or maybe it had been gone a long time. She hadn't talked to anyone. Maybe she hadn't noticed. Outlaws don't come here, not those outlaws. They want comfort. I'm the only one who comes here. Well, sometimes the hunters drop in. Get out of the corner. I'll put some more wood in the fire to make it brighter. You can't see very well now. Who am I talking to? He took off his rucksack, went to the stove, threw in some logs. In the light of the open door, Nanny saw a tall, bearded man in a coat with a fur collar and a huge furry hat. She saw nothing else, for she did not come out from around the corner. She became frightened. The man took off the hat and coat. He put a pot of water on the fire, whispered something, took bread and sausage out of his backpack. He quickly made sandwiches and turned to Nanny. Breakfast is ready. Please make it. Yes, come here. Or are you already thinking of running away from me into the woods? I wouldn't advise it. It's dark and cold there. Anyway, a hot tea wouldn't hurt. It's really silly to stand in a corner with nowhere to go. The man doesn't seem dangerous. The sausage smells so good that Nanny decided to eat first, and then already think about escape. She went back to her favorite coat, took a sandwich and a cup of tea. The best breakfast ever. Secretly, she watched the man. Not bad, young and not ugly. But let's get to know each other. Harry, the local hunter. Nanny, where am I? It's a long way to town. 100 kilometers to town to my house, and 5 kilometers to the hunting ground. There's a road there, and you're in the hunting ground. Sometimes hunters come here for a day or two. In winter, you can only get here on skis. That's why I was so surprised there were no skis at home. Is there anyone in the house? I like this hunting ground. No one around, just the woods, and I'm the master of the forest. How did you end up here? When Nanny told her story, she thought it sounded unreal. It was like some kind of gangster show. He listened attentively, walking from corner to corner, sometimes asking questions. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly in front of Nanny, and I remembered. I'd always thought I'd seen you somewhere. You work at the local TV station as an editor. Yes, television. How did you know that? I saw your picture on the local news last night. They said a man was missing. The company editor asked me to let you know if anyone knew anything. I can't remember the last name, but it was accurate. Nanny was surprised that the missing person was discovered. Who did this to you? And most importantly, why? Any guesses? None. I've been trying to figure out what happened all day. I can't imagine. Who was I bothering so much? Well, husbands, lovers, friends. Not husbands, not lovers. I don't have many friends. But I never crossed anyone. I've replayed my personal life 20 times in my head. No, that's not the reason. And then there's work and caring co-workers running around looking for you. It can't be if you think back to all the conflicts, the ones that seem insignificant to you. You realize it's like you've been found. I'll call the editorial office and make my colleagues happy. And someone will be so happy that you won't make it home. You'll disappear again, and this time for good. Before you announce yourself, you have to figure out who wants you to keep quiet. I don't know. I don't understand anything about your television business. Explain to me what you do. How many people are in your charge? Who's guilty of what? Tell me everything. Let's think about what's going on. Do you know that someone wanted to silence you? Nanny's job title was the long and the beautiful, but in short, she was the editor in charge of everything that went on the air. Everything that was created in the newsroom came down to Nanny. She shaped the air in accordance with the broadcasting law and the channel's license. 2 production editors organized the daily airing in 6 boxes and ships transmitted it all on air. Nanny also had an assistant, Maddie, who mostly prepared the paperwork and made sure the copyrights were respected. There were no conflicts. You can't consider the box skipping the airwaves a conflict and his late-night call to Nanny a shout-out. What to do? Or was it Maddie's mistake that led to children's broadcasting being taken over? For the week, it's 1/10%. That's 9 seconds, but the inspectors noticed. Apparently, they had nothing more important to do that week than counting. How long did the TV keep the kids in front of the screens? They had to write explanatory letters, personally take the blame, ask not to find the channel, but to limit themselves to a strict warning. There were many such daily problems. He who does nothing is not mistaken. But all this does not look like revenge at all. There is something different here. I remembered what I've been doing the last few days. Yes, the usual, a whirlwind from morning to night, preparing a report for the Antitrust Committee. But it's not the first time. They're checking film production licenses, the legality of payments to authors. Now they have demanded a list of all commercials aired in the last 3 months, with the time of airing by day and hour. Wait for it. The price of a commercial depends on the time. Of course, the morning slot has one price and prime time has a different price. Do you know exactly when and how many times the commercial aired? Of course, I compiled all the montage lists for airing. That seems to be what they need. Let's think about it. If an advertiser doesn't want to pay taxes, they can pay for the morning slots and give the rest of the money in cash. And that's a good deal for them. What about unreported income? There's nothing wrong with the paperwork. There was such an advertiser who paid for a slot, paid tax, but at what time? And how many times was the ad aired? Only you know that. Well, not many people know, but you're the only one who can prove it. Isn't that an argument? No, it's nonsense. What makes you think that? Tell me, who's in charge of advertising? Jack, the commercial director. How much money can he make from that? Obviously, he shares it with someone. Probably the CEO and someone else to keep from getting caught, but he still makes a lot of money himself. As far as I understand, advertising is a lucrative business. Who but you knows how much advertising goes on the air? Everyone who watches TV and the people who collect them and produce them. Maddie has all the data right now. She's tabulating it and preparing a report, but she doesn't know how much it costs or how much she was paid. I don't know either, by the way. Say what you want, but I have a feeling this is about money and a lot of it. And besides money, your bosses are looking at real jail time for embezzlement. So much for motive. I'm not saying it's true, but it's a great theory. We need to check which of your colleagues you trust completely. Before this conversation, Nanny had trusted everyone, but now she was beginning to doubt them. It's strange to be suspicious of people you've worked with for so many years. Through hardship and adversity, they're all like family. But someone in that family had decided that Nanny knew too much. She had no doubt that the attempt on her life was related to her work. She has no inheritance to divide. Fortunately, her parents are alive. Her personal life is calm and smooth. So it's about work. Who can she trust to the end? Nanny only confided in her friend Beatty, but she has nothing to do with the TV channel. She can't help. That leaves Mighty. They had a nice, warm relationship. They even went on vacations together. They flew to Egypt. When they went on vacation, the CEO of the company, Barbara, gave them some advice. In the hotel, give $10 at the reception, and you will be settled closer to the beach. There are hotels where it takes about 10 minutes to walk to the sea. Please, no extreme sports, no parachutes, no diving, no safaris. The service there is such that no one guarantees anything. We need you alive and well, in a jersey with a big hole in it. Maddie walked up to the receptionist. He was looking at Maddie, but not at her face. He just couldn't take his eyes off her breasts. Nanny stood on the doorstep with $10 in her hand. As soon as Maddie signaled, she'd run away. They made do without the dollars. The magic shirt led them to a room with a veranda overlooking the beach. The first night, they signed up for scuba diving and safaris. They didn't bother with parachutes. They'd been promised. Nanny had always wanted to go to Egypt, Pharaoh and the pyramids of Luxor, the Valley of the Kings, the Cairo Museum with Tutankhamun's mummy and mask. She wanted to see everything. First, they bought a tour to the pyramids. It was far away. Egypt is not a quiet place. A caravan of tourist buses is escorted by jeeps with soldiers. Since the Luxor incident in 1997, Egypt, whose main source of income is tourism, guards every tourist. When they arrived at the pyramids, a guide said they could buy a ticket and go inside the pyramids. But if there are heart problems, it's best not to do that. It was a brilliant marketing move. Everyone bought tickets. What could possibly be so bad for your heart? Are there mummies wandering around in there? No cameras allowed in the pyramid. Where do we put them? There was only one option. They took turns standing at the entrance, and the problem was solved right on the spot. The newlyweds wanted to go, so the girls went, and the young husband stayed with the cameras. When they returned, he was leaving. It became clear why it was better not to go into the pyramid with a sick heart. It was a narrow passage, a staircase going sharply down, not even a staircase, but boards with some crossbolts. It was stuffy, difficult to breathe, and the passage was low. They had to walk on bent legs, but somehow they made it. And what was it? An empty room with a fence pit around it. No mummies, no sarcophagus. It's all in museums. Just some barely visible pictures on the walls. They stood, breathed, and crawled back. Sweaty, barely breathing, on all fours, they crawled outside. Nanny sang the young wife a song. "Tell your husband not to go in there." Well, no. The young wife smirked. Let him go. Maddie and Nanny were on the same page. They were interested in everything. Desert safaris, diving, the Nile Valley. They were so fascinated by the miraculously preserved palaces of ancient civilization that they didn't have time to relax on the beach. In the morning, they would run out for half an hour, sometimes in the evening when they returned from an excursion. Perhaps Maddie, Nanny suggested, though she could doubt anyone. Given recent events, she couldn't do without help. She had to trust someone. And if not Maddie, then who? They decided that Harry would go into town tomorrow morning, find Maddie, and try to find out who was doing what at the TV station. Of course, Maddie was unlikely to open up to a stranger, and he couldn't call her and ask for help. First, he needs to find out if she can be trusted. Nanny disappeared for everyone, including Maddie. Nanny, you're going to have to stay here for a little while longer. I'll come by tomorrow night and bring the skis. You can move in with me. If you're going to be on my side, I'll need a connection and internet there. In the meantime, think about what paperwork we'll need and whether Maddie can send it. The assembly sheets aren't classified information. What's the point? Well, we count the number of rentals. And then what? Look, imagine a situation like this with an advertiser. Let's get a price list from the advertisers, find out how much we have to pay. But we won't know how much we actually paid. Only the company's accounting department knows how much they paid. And our accounting department is terrible. They don't give us any information. Okay, we'll deal with the accounting later. I'll ask Maddie tomorrow. She's married? No. Are you trying to charm her? I'm gonna have to get married. Cool, I respect that. You're not one to brag. Maddie doesn't like serious peacocks. And as for getting married, that's the right thing to do. Take a good look. She's still alive. It's a miracle. We sat for a while. Harry asked about the employees, what they did, their personalities, friends, family. Who has access to the company's finances and who would like to but can't. The more information you have, the easier it is to see who's capable of what. Okay, I'm out of here. You've got enough firewood. I'm leaving some sausage. Wait for me. I'll be back with news. I'm not bored. And don't go anywhere. Nanny was alone again, but now it wasn't so lonely and scary. She had found a kind man who was determined to help the poor girl. She was freezing in the deep woods. John came and asked, "Aren't you afraid to fight? Is there anything I can do to help?" It's a good story. Realistic. It turned out that there are situations in life when you can only trust someone you see for the first time in your life. And you are suspicious of every acquaintance with whom you have been through so much. You have to be suspicious. Harry's the only one we can rely on right now. No one else can help, except maybe Maddie. Maddie sat in an empty office. The last newscast was over. The editorial staff had dispersed. The studio was plunged into darkness. Only the air sign was lit. Nanny felt so lost without Nanny that she couldn't bring herself to finish the report for the antitrust authorities. She started entering the data into the spreadsheet, made mistakes, erased, started over. It was impossible to concentrate. All she could think about was the disease. What happened? Where did the management go? That's good too. They advertised. They're so connected. They can get the whole town talking. Sounds like they're worried. Although there's a rumor going around that she didn't disappear, she quit her job. Apparently, they're planning to fire her. That's our Nanny. Maddie's never gonna believe it. Something bad happened to her. If only she knew how to help. She rushed in without thinking. Maddie, oh Maddie, the general's driver. He crept up unnoticed. He had a knack for popping up where no one expected him. Nanny, you work on her some more. Arnold, stay out of my way. I still have to finish the accident report. Let me take you home. There's no one left. You're sitting here all alone. What are you doing here? Did you take Barbara? Why did you come back? I came back for you during the accident. Cut the crap. It's 12:30. Let's go. Maddie looked at his watch. Wow, really? It's almost midnight. You guys are disgusting. But right now I'm just in time to turn in an unfinished report. She shut down the computer, closed her office, and followed Arnold. As they were pulling out of the parking lot, she noticed Tony's commercial director getting into the car. What brings him here in the middle of the night? As they drove to Maddie's, Arnold was witty, telling stupid jokes, life stories, trying to make very dubious compliments, hinting at feelings, asking her out on a date. His chatter boiled down to the fact that Maddie, being an intelligent girl, with her age and bright appearance, should be happy that the prince in the director's Jeep shows signs of attention. The accident interrupted him abruptly. His diet distracted her. She thought about the fact that Tony must be up to something at night in the empty office. She couldn't connect it to Nanny's disappearance, but there was a disturbing feeling that something was going wrong in the Danish kingdom. At home, Maddie found her father waiting for her. He hadn't gone to bed. His daughter needed to be fed, and work was going on around the clock. Maddie was already thinking about quitting the network. What kind of job is this? She studied so hard, got a red diploma, and now she's working as a secretary for some girl's father. They're secretaries too. And I'm the personal assistant. Nanny is a professional of the highest caliber. She's also a good, kind person. Now she's in trouble. I'll collect the money and go find a quieter place. It's up to you. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I can't do that. Nanny needs help. How will you help her? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. In the morning, a young bearded man called out to Maddie outside her office. Maddie, excuse me, I need to talk to you. Specifically you. Tell me, what's the problem? I'll direct you to the right person. Do you have a complaint? Or do you have an interesting story to tell? I wonder what brings a man like him to the TV station. He probably solves his own problems without the help of television. He doesn't look like an advertiser. And what could he be advertising? He looks like he comes from the mountains or the woods. Although who knows, maybe he has some unique eco-farm or beekeeping, and he decided to order a story. We should get rid of him and find advertisers. What's your name? Harry. Harry, let me take you to the advertising department. I understand you haven't made an appointment and no one's meeting you, and they won't just let you in. Let's go. All right, let's go. We still need to find out what the advertising rates are. While Harry was playing the tough entrepreneur willing to spend a lot of money on advertising for Maddie, She was surprised to find that someone had neatly corrected yesterday's report. The number of rentals had been changed in almost every commercial. She didn't even have to check the paperwork. She remembered exactly what data she had entered into the spreadsheet, especially since she had messed up and corrected everything 5 times yesterday. Like it or not, she memorized it. Of course, Maddie knew that everything could be restored, but she couldn't do it herself. There was no way to contact the tech department. What if they did it? Besides, all the set-up sheets had disappeared. There was nothing to compare the calculations with. What do we do next? Should I report it to management? Maddie decided to report the missing sheets, but not to say anything about correcting the report. She didn't seem to notice. A vague doubt plagued her that the report was Barry's doing. If she said now that the report was false, not only would she not help Nanny, but she'd be in trouble herself. Maddie was torn between the fear of hurting Nanny and the desire to share it with someone. He pondered whether to ask for advice on what he could do on his own. She didn't understand what was going on at all. The thought that Nanny hadn't disappeared on her own crossed her mind more and more. Someone had helped her, so no one in the company could be trusted. If he wasn't involved himself, he might have blabbed. Who knows? There was someone at the door, either the beekeeper or the lumberjack. That's why we have to discuss it in the bar. I'll meet you at the cafe on the corner. God, how strange he is, but he does not seem to be infected by her unearthly beauty, so it's not a setup. He's not professionally interested in her either. So what's the big deal? It's very important. Harry, I don't know if you can trust the girl, but we don't have a choice. Otherwise, she won't want to talk. I know where Nanny is. Meet me at the cafe. Come when you can. How does he even know who he is? She decided right away she was going to Apple. If there was even a small chance of finding out what happened to Nanny, she'd go anywhere, even to a coffee shop with some guy she didn't know. But first she had to report the missing files to management. They'd start bothering security, trying to figure out who had keys to the office. Maddie didn't have time for that. And if management itself was in on the document swap, which Maddie had little doubt it was, they'd still have to pretend they were actively working. Keep them busy. And she would talk to the strange lumberjack. Why had he come to her? Nanny had sent him. Harry had no doubt that Maddie needed to be told everything or they would get nowhere. Without their insider in the company, they wouldn't know anything. Could this sweet girl be trusted? It's unclear. Nanny didn't suspect anyone at all. Everyone seemed kind and honest to her. Harry sat in the cafe and looked out the window, wondering if she was coming or not. If she didn't come, the whole plan would fail. He would have to look for someone else. But who, with everyone under suspicion? Harry would never admit it to himself. But he didn't just want Maddie to come because it would be hard to help Nanny without her. He just wanted a strange girl to come, someone unmodern, someone nice and pretty. Glasses on her nose, a ponytail on the back of her head. It was nice to think of her. He could even imagine waiting for her at the cafe, not for business, but for a date. Hell, he should shave off his beard. He looked completely wild in his own woods. Oh, is that a pretty girl coming? Stop. It's not a date, after all. Who cares whether to tell or not? Although one option is to tell everything. Otherwise, she won't believe it. She'd be scared, she'd send him away, and she wouldn't help him. Maddie was very afraid. She was afraid of this strange man who appeared out of nowhere. What if he was a con man who had found out about Nanny's disappearance and was now trying to cash in on it? Or worse, he might be involved in the kidnapping himself. But if there's even the tiniest chance of finding out where Nanny is, it has to be done. In the most independent way possible, just to hide her fear. Maddie approached the table. Harry could see how nervous she was, how she calmed the frightened girls. He didn't know, so he decided to tell her everything at once. Either she would believe him or she would run away. And then we'd see. Maddie listened and realized she believed Harry. You couldn't make up a story like that. She decided not to speak of her suspicions yet. First, she had to make sure Nanny was all right. Then she could talk to her. Just not right now. She doesn't have a cell phone, and reception's bad in the woods. She'll call you tonight from the hunting lodge. So you ready to help? Nanny said she needed some paperwork. I'll talk to Nanny, and then I'll decide how careful you are. What do you want? By the way, my friend's missing. Thank God she's alive. And you want me to tell the first person I meet? Who knows? Maybe you're pretending to be innocent, but you're really an outlaw from the deep woods." Harry laughed. "How did you figure me out?" "Matey, let's switch to informal speech. It'll be easier that way. And this guy is such a jerk. I want a more intimate and trusting relationship." "We're a long way from trust, but you're right. It's easier to talk. There's a dude sitting at the counter looking at you." Maddie looked over her shoulder. "Damn, why did Arnold have to be here? It's not lunchtime. Is he watching her?" Arnold realized he had been spotted and headed towards them. Maddie stood across the table in front of him. Harry muttered something to himself and headed for the exit. Harry didn't lose his temper. He stood up and said loudly to Maddie, "See you later, Maddie, like we agreed?" Maddie turned around and waved Harry off, noticing Arnold, who was standing in the middle of the hall with his mouth open. He caught up to Maddie, walked beside her. He was silent, but not for long. Maddie. God, it's annoying to hear his trademark address. What kind of husband is he? Is he really so wonderful? Why him? He's just come from Siberia. He's got factories and steamships there, and he's a local with a house in the country. That means he's rich. Why not just rich? I'm poor enough. You can't lie. That's why I don't lie. What's the point of lying if you're going to be found out? Where did you find someone like that? I can't tell you the details of my personal life. I think you're meddling in something that's none of your business." "I see. It didn't work out." It's harsh, but it's true. Maddie sat in her office. She wanted to shove herself away, not see anyone. Better yet, she wanted to go home and think things through. The abundance of information was overloading her brain. It was necessary to organize everything, to separate the important from the meaningless. How do I know what's important? Until I talk to Nanny, I will not know how to live until tonight. Ah, Arnold, the messenger from the garden again. He's been showing up too often. Everywhere you go, you run into Arnold. He came to call me on the carpet. Apparently, the director wants something from the secretary. I wonder what Barbara wants from her. She hasn't been very attentive to her in the past. If she's condescending to Maddie, it's not gonna be good. Maddie, I'm going to ask you to tell your boss that she's not fired for absenteeism, but for sabotage. Shredding documents is a felony. Let her be thankful we're not pursuing criminal charges. Barbara, first of all, I don't know where Nanny is. Secondly, are you aware that the documents went missing when she was gone? No, I'm not aware of that. There was no one in the office at night. Well, either security's covering for Nanny. That girl, everybody loves her. And if she told you not to say what happened, no one will. Or did you take the files at her request? You were here till almost midnight last night. Ask your driver what I had in my hand when I left the office. Did he see me write my resignation, or am I being fired for sabotage too? Maddie, I strongly suggest you contact Nanny and consult with her, rather than hiding and coming to explain yourself. Go get to work. It's such a weird conversation, deaf and abnormal. It feels like they have decided to blame Nanny for all the sins of the company. What's convenient? How did Barbara think Maddie knew where Nanny was? Maybe Arnold overheard something in the cafe, sitting far away, couldn't hear, but could have guessed and reported it. Gossip is his specialty. You mention the devil and he shows up. Arnold walked down the corridor, ducked around the corner. He was done for the day. She couldn't take another intellectual conversation. Arnold entered Maddie's office. She wanted to pass by quietly, but they were talking about something. Arnold suddenly became very curious as to what useful things he would hear. And she did hear, and a very useful one at that. Barbara ordered Arnold to keep an eye on her. And the other guys she'd been seeing, they have to find Nanny. And those idiots who didn't follow through have to work off the money they got. Maddie's hair stood on end in horror. What was going on? Had Nanny found out she was being hunted? But now Maddie knew she was being followed. She would be more careful. But the ferret was circling. You didn't take care of him. Let's see who's smarter. The day dragged on endlessly. She couldn't wait to get home and finally talk to Nanny. Now there was something to tell. Not just conjecture, but facts. But she had to make it to the end of the day. Maddie, let's go home. I'll drive you home. Or are you just gonna sit here all night again? Yeah, Arnold, take me. They said to keep an eye on me anyway, so at least take me home. On the way, Arnold kept asking who the guy was that came to see Maddie, where he lived, where he worked. Maddie pretended to be a fool in love. said she wouldn't say anything. Afraid of jinxing his happiness, she didn't think she knew anything about him, but she wanted to know. She saw something strange. She had once decided he was nothing, but she thought about him all day long. Arnold was showering her with clumsy compliments again, hinting that he might approach her. Maddie thought angrily about the incident that ordered them to keep an eye on her, so she sat under the door all night. Home at last. All she had to do was wait for Nanny to call. There was something to tell, but Nanny still hadn't called. Well, until Harry got home, until he got to the village and then back to Nanny. It was about time she called. Maddie couldn't concentrate on anything. She sat there waiting for the call. What could have happened? Maybe Nanny had decided she couldn't trust Maddie and she had so many suspicions. More importantly, evidence that she should tell on Nanny. After sitting at the bar for another hour, she decided to call Harry herself and left her phone number. Finally, Maddie got around to making the call. What kind of detectives are we? I left you my number, but I didn't take yours. Nanny doesn't remember your number. We can't call you. We're sitting around wondering who's the fool. Maddie told Lousy about the detectives, everything that had happened during the day. Adjustments to the report, missing sheets, Barry's strange behavior, Nanny's firing, and Arnold, as I said, wondering how much could fit into one day. She was especially concerned about Tatiana's words about some idiots who hadn't finished something. Nanny remembered that when they had taken her into the woods, the bandits had talked about some scary woman, apparently a customer. Could it be Barbara? No, it couldn't be. The director of a TV company, formerly a famous TV journalist, a star of the screen, a woman with impeccable taste, and a powerful husband. True, there were rumors that her last husband was a criminal and earned money for his business not by honest labor for the good of society. But who remembers the past? Now he is a respected entrepreneur with an impeccable reputation. It's hard to imagine that such people could resort to such things. What would be at stake to commit a crime? Something more serious than money, even big money. It turned out that the disappearance of the mounting sheets was no problem at all. Nanny is used to television crews calling at night on weekends to make quick adjustments to the broadcast. The sheets should always be in front of her eyes. So Nanny sent all the data to her home computer every day. True, she didn't keep them for long, but 2 weeks was enough time to recover them. The problem is how to remove the laptop from the house. No keys, passport, cell phone. All were in her bag when Nanny left the house that fateful morning. The second set of keys is in the possession of Wanda, her younger sister. Maddie, Wanda knows you. I'll call her. She'll give you the keys. Just please be careful. Maybe there's someone else watching besides Arnold. Let them watch, let them fire her. As long as Nanny's found, Maddie's wings grew. If she'd known where those wings would take her, she wouldn't have been so happy. As agreed, she took the keys to the apartment from Wanda and went to get her laptop. It was very uncomfortable in someone else's empty apartment. She didn't turn on the light for some reason. She decided she shouldn't. She probably seen detectives in there, always snooping around in the dark in other people's apartments. Maddie picked up her laptop, walked toward the exit, and suddenly heard someone trying to open the door. Not thinking straight from fear, for some reason she put the laptop in the hallway and ran around the apartment trying to think of somewhere to hide. The sound of the lock stopped. Voices were heard outside the door. Maddie quietly walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a hooded jacket stood on the landing. His back was to the door. Maddie couldn't see his face, only the two elderly women. Apparently, the neighbors had a question about what he was doing outside someone else's apartment. The owners. Don't wander around. I'll call the police. The man called them old chickens and ran down the stairs. Maddie went to the window, saw him come out of the driveway, stand for a minute, get in his car, and drive away. Maddie was so nervous her legs wouldn't hold her up. She wondered what he wanted in Nanny's apartment. Or was he following? It was scary to think what would happen if he caught Maddie here. It's good to have such vigilant old ladies. I wish them good health. Just as long as those old ladies don't turn her into the police. She's got to try to get away unnoticed somehow. First part of the plan is done. Laptop received. The next day, Maddie copied the fake report onto a flash drive and wrote a request for a leave of absence. To be honest, she didn't believe she'd be let go. After all, she's Nanny's accomplice, It's safer to keep her under surveillance. And she needs a break. Together, it would be quicker to figure out what was so dangerous about those documents. She explained to Harry how to get to them. You go to the village of Yuzhny, you can take the train, but then you still have to get from the station to the village. It's more convenient that way. The bus runs more often and you can get straight to Yuzhny. I'll meet you there. I've been to Yuzhny myself. They were building a village there for the movie. It's still there. They'd also opened museums there, didn't they, May? I'm still watching in case someone follows you. They let you go too easily. Don't scare me, I'm scared enough as it is. The morning after hailing a cab after the accident, she stood at the window trying to see if anyone was following her, realizing that even if someone was, she wouldn't see them. It was silly to expect watchers to be sitting on the bench outside the driveway. Dad insisted on going with Matey, all the while reading his book. Where are you going? I don't have to go anywhere. I'm gonna freak out here. Dad, stop it. I'll be back in 3 days and I'll call every day. Don't worry, I'm not a little girl anymore and your grown-up nanny got into some kind of story and dragged you into it. A cab pulled up to Maddie. She ran out the driveway, ran to the car from under a bench. A black cat ran near her feet. Damn it, well, let's not believe in omens. Who knows where the cat has to go? Maybe this wasn't a bad sign for her. She threw her bag on the seat and slammed the door. Please hurry to the bus station. The driver, an elderly man, watched the passenger with surprise. She kept looking around, as if checking to see if anyone was following her. Did she run away from her husband? I don't have a husband. You're young, but you live a strange life. I don't understand you. My daughter is the same, almost 30. No family, no kids. How many times had Maddie heard that word? Why did it have to be? They planned their lives by years, the way they organized things. Marry by 25, have a child by 30, preferably 2. Then everything's right. It's like other people. What other people? People are different. Everyone has their own story, not like the others. A fate, a whole life, which everyone tries to fit into the bounds of decency. Surprisingly, complete strangers, like this driver, always know better how to live. And the driver did not stop talking. In our time, young people were different. Everyone worked. And now they just drag themselves along. That's where the oligarchs came from. They rob the people and live in luxury. You, for example, you don't look poor by your clothes. Where did you earn it? I've been working all my life, and I have nothing. And you probably have an apartment and a car. You can keep quiet. You didn't stop me from talking. I don't like it, it's true, it's annoying. What did I do to deserve this punishment? And my hands are shaking with fear. And now I have to listen to this nonsense. The day didn't start well. All because of the black cat. Finally, they arrived. Maddie didn't go inside the bus station. She stayed outside in the cold, but she could see everyone getting on the bus. She sat at the back of the bus and saw everyone who entered. No matter how much she looked, she didn't see anything suspicious. The bus started moving. Maddie even calmed down a little. Why panic? It's all right. It's time to stop playing these games, or we could go crazy. Harry was already waiting at the bus stop at the bar. She didn't recognize him right away. He had shaved off his beard. Harry wouldn't admit it to himself, but he really wanted to see Maddie. He was worried, anxious. For the first time since the nasty scandals with his ex-wife after the divorce, he thought that life as a recluse wasn't so pleasant. Maybe it was time to get back to life and try to be happy again. No more living in the woods and hiding from people. Hunting Manor. Harry envisioned in a fairy tale illustration a sturdy wooden house with a high porch. Around it were small houses, guest baths, something like a summer kitchen with a stone grill and a snow-covered pine forest all around. The only thing missing was Santa. When she saw Nanny at the bar, she burst into tears and rushed to hug her. Why are you crying? Everything's going to be all right now. We'll sort everything out, and Harry will protect us like a loyal knight. Let's go inside. You must be cold. Let's have some tea. Maddie still couldn't quite calm down. She felt sorry for Nanny. Is it me? You're not crying, though I'd be hysterical if I were you. You know, there's a Japanese fable. I think it's about a swallow bird. Evil people destroyed her nest, killed her chicks, but she started to build a new one. They asked her why she wasn't crying. You are in such grief, she replied. I will cry tomorrow when I have time. Right now, I don't have time, so I will cry later too. For 2 days, the girls sat and counted how many commercials were aired, how many blind matches were left, and how much it cost according to the channel's rates. The total amount turned out to be exorbitant, several million. Nanny did not send the fake reports to the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and they decided to get rid of her. It's not just about money. There is a criminal case on the fact of embezzlement, and it is unclear why the anti-monopoly authorities have started such an investigation now. For so many years they didn't notice anything, and now all of a sudden. Oh girls, what would you do without me? Harry smiled slyly. I have an acquaintance who can tell you exactly who dug up the TV channel and why. I'll go into town tomorrow and give you all the details. By the way, I'll show you all your calculations. I'll advise someone on what to do about it. Harry left, and the two girls got bored in the house, so they decided to take a walk to the village. It's not far, there's skying there. We could go for a walk. No sooner had they gotten far than they noticed a car turning off the road towards the house. It wasn't Harry's. Lying in a snowdrift, they saw two stout men get out of the car and enter the house. They might have been hunters, but there was no need to check, and they were dressed in city clothes. You don't go hunting in such clothes. When the men came out onto the porch, one of them had a laptop in his hands. They went through all the guest houses. They checked all the barns and got in the car. They drove away from the house, but they didn't go anywhere. They waited. Nanny called Harry. Harry, there are two strange guys here. Where are you? At the house. No, we were going to walk through the woods to the village, but we saw them. If we hadn't, we'd have gone straight to them. There's no need to panic. Nanny, do you remember the way to the village? Well, roughly. Go that way. They won't find you there. Wait for me. I'll be there in 5 hours. They crawled through the snowdrifts. They dragged their skis behind them. They were afraid to get up. What if Nanny sees them, she thought. I seem to have a new habit of crawling through snowdrifts. Finally, they decided they had measured out enough snowdrifts. Now they could get on their skis. What remained was to figure out where to go. Nanny remembered which way the farm was. Do you remember the road? Harry got carried away. What's there to remember? The same pine trees and the same snowdrifts. We got a little lost, but we found the farm. Nanny's heart clenched. It felt so familiar, like home. It was like coming home. Matey looked at the firebox with surprise. Nanny, what is that? It's Matey's stove. We're having tea now. How can you be here alone? I assure you, you can live here. It's scary to be alone in the woods. I almost killed Harry with a log out of fear. It was like being surrounded by bandits. Listen, Nanny, do you know anything about Mark? He won't tell me anything. Not interested. I liked him. He didn't tell me much. All I know is that he was married. His ex-girlfriend still lives in his city apartment and won't leave. She left Harry. She lived with someone for a couple years, and then she came back and said she had nowhere to live, so she would stay with him for now. At this point, Harry discovered that he had nowhere to live. When I asked him how he managed to get rid of her, he laughed. He found a live-in job. Sounds like she fell in love in a bar. Well, that's right. It's no sin to fall in love with a man like Harry. He looks at her with a tenderness that makes your heart sink. Nanny can't fall in love. Maybe she doesn't know how to love. There was a chance to learn it with Anthony, but she missed it. It's amazing. So many years have passed, and she's still living in a fantasy world. She still imagines unrealized happiness. It's time to get back to sinful earth and meet a decent, honest guy like Harry. After all, he's not the only one. I'm sure there are others. You just have to look harder. Nanny, tell me, what's wrong with us? We're not stupid or unattractive. We're not waiting for oligarchs. Why aren't we married? Where's the prince? Just because the horses are dead doesn't change anything. Why do we always attract guys like Arnold? Nanny, you could get married. You're so beautiful. Don't tell me you haven't been invited. I get asked out all the time, but you shouldn't marry a breeder. You're lucky you have Harry. I'll wait. Maybe there's someone else out there. Samantha went to college with Nanny. She'd been married 3 times in 4 years. Well, it happens. It's a girl's hobby to get married, but it wasn't that simple. The first time she married a student athlete named Richard, the second time for Tom, an excellent and public figure. The third time, to an unrecognized genius Frank. After receiving her diplomas, Samantha planned to marry Evan, a literature teacher. She began to be asked more questions. Samantha replied that she couldn't slow down or she wouldn't get anything done. And I'm still getting married. I'm changing my last name alphabetically. Can you imagine how many husbands I have ahead of me in the State Duma? Maybe we'll be able to choose such husbands. But Nanny didn't want to. It wasn't her system. She still believed that you can get married once and for all. And whether or not it will work out is another matter. But one could dream. On the way home, Harry decided to replay the game. Of course, brave men are crazy. They sing psalms to them. But he didn't want to risk his life. He stopped by the village, explained the situation to his hunting friends. They agreed to go with him and see what kind of guests they were. When the uninvited guests saw the hunters, they quickly retreated. How rude. They didn't even say hello. Harry could have walked them back to town and returned, but the thought didn't occur to him. I don't think they'll be back today. You go with the girls and we'll stay here just in case. I don't trust them. I'm used to this gangster mode. When Harry gets to the manor, it'll be calmer. The pretty girl couldn't find her place because of the uncertainty. Well, did you find out, Hermit? Shall we go home? Maybe we shouldn't. I'm getting tired of running back and forth. What if someone shows up again and we have to run away again? No one's gonna show up. Today's bandits don't know the news. If they did, they'd send their employers away. Girls, I got news. Harry, don't keep us in suspense. Tell us. Well, actually, no. Let's go home first. I'll tell you all about it there. You want a kebab and cognac? Then get your skis and let's go. More snow, skis, pine trees. Nanny hadn't skied in so long, and Maddie had never done it before. She could barely move her legs. Harry helped and encouraged her. Yes, he was ready to carry her in his arms. Nanny hoped that Harry would say there was no more danger and they could go home. She loved being at the manor. She would have loved to come here if she had been invited. But right now she really wanted to go home, back to normal life, where there was no fear, no bandits appearing out of nowhere, where you didn't suspect betrayal from people with whom you shared many experiences. It seemed to Nanny that everything that was happening to her was someone's stupid joke. Life doesn't turn an ordinary girl like her into a crime novel. We'll be there soon. Harry will explain everything. We'll laugh and forget it like a bad dream. Because that's not how life works. It's a prank. On the playground in front of the brazier, merry hunters were grilling kebabs over charcoal. The smell was so strong that Nanny decided she would be impolite. The house was set up with a table full of food, a classic winter picnic, a garage of sleeping kebab man, pickled mushrooms, pickled tomatoes. The greens that appeared out of nowhere, whether bread or Armenian flatbread, were incomprehensible. Did the hunters bake it themselves? And the last touch, a bottle of cognac. It was delicious. But if they would wander through the snowy forest until 12 o'clock, it would be even tastier. At first, they didn't think about anything. They just ate. Then they started looking at Harry. Well, what's your news? Everyone was waiting to see what Harry had found out. He just kept building up the tension. When he realized that their patience was wearing thin, and they were going to start pulling information out of him like a captured gorilla, he spoke. My source tells me that all your efforts, Nanny, to cover your tracks have been in vain. All that fuss with reports and unrecorded publicity was necessary to confirm their fraudulent scheme. Wait, I don't understand who needed this. Did the Antitrust Committee decide to catch them for providing false information? That's what they caught them for. They got rid of you and submitted false data. But the Antitrust Committee had nothing to do with it. Your TV channel has long been under the scrutiny of the Regional Prosecutor's Office, and the new owner has initiated an investigation. What new owner? General Director Barbara and Commercial Director Tony decided they had created the perfect scheme to steal money. For years, a portion of the revenue from advertising and commercial programs went straight into their pockets. A little was given to the company lawyer. Someone had to cover for the head accountant to keep her from blabbing. It would have gone on like that, but the shareholders did the math and were shocked. For so many years, there is no profit from the TV channel. They don't ask for money, but there is no benefit. They decided not to look into the reasons and just sell the channel. However, they realized it too late. About 10 years ago, local TV channels were bought in various batches with pleasure. But now, who needs it? There was a man. He had several radio stations, but he really wanted television. He dreams of becoming a media magnate. Who's going to stop him? But before he bought it, he demanded a full financial audit. For 6 months, they watched the channel. It became clear how much money was being wasted, and also that if they borrowed less and paid dividends, their interest would not be caught. The prosecutor's office opened a case, and now your directors are under investigation. By the way, the attack on you is a separate case. It's a pure criminal offense, so you're free to come back. You have nothing more to worry about. I hope you're not running away now. The hunters scattered to the cottages, exhausted by everything they had experienced, and maybe by the brandy. She fell asleep on the sofa by the fireplace, but Nanny couldn't sleep. Too many impressions. Harry couldn't sleep either. He could be heard walking up and down the stairs. Nanny went up the stairs, calling softly to Harry. "Are you awake? Let's go and have tea." It was dark outside. The house was warm and cozy. She quietly advised Maddie, and Harry drank salty tea and argued. "Nanny, you told me about the Gallatin trip and that wonderful boy Anthony. Did you try to find him?" "Why?" "Because it's been 10 years, and there was no love, just sympathy. He doesn't even remember me. How many of these deer have you had in your life?" "I can't tell you. I had a love named Amanda when I was in my 20s. It's been years, I remember, but it didn't stop me from getting married. But it didn't help with married life either. You say you went to Washington University. What department?" "I don't know. Physics, I think." "Well, that's my department, physics and math. I went to DC too, but earlier. Then you're Anthony? Do you want me to see if I can find him?" "No, why? If he's married and happy, I have no business being in his life. If it turns out that his life didn't work out because he's an overconfident guy, he's an unemployed alcoholic with abandoned wives and kids, he has no business being in my life. I don't want to be disappointed. Let him remain a romantic memory, an ideal to compare all the men I meet in my life to. Even though they don't, it's hard to compete with an ideal." In the morning, they got ready to leave. Harry couldn't think of what to say to make Maddie stay, agonizing over the thought. Nanny intervened. It would be a shame if intelligent adults who liked each other broke up without taking the first step. "Maddie, you're on vacation. Why would you leave?" "I'd stay too, but I have to go to work. It must be chaos over there right now." "Yeah, my dad's freaking out over there. So now our adventure is over. And call your dad. Tell him to stay a couple more days." "Harry, why don't you say something?" Harry was silent. There was amazement in his eyes for so easily suggesting that she stay. "No, I'm going to go now. I'll just get my bag." Maddie ran up the stairs. Harry rushed after her. Nanny smiled. "Well, that's good. Everything seems to have worked out." "Maddie, wait please. There's something I want to tell you." Maddie walked over to Harry, giving him a hug. "And I think it's pretty clear." Harry took Nanny into town in Harry's clothes, which were 5 sizes too big for him. She would look weird on the bus. After changing, Nanny drove to work. She couldn't wait to find out what was going on there. Harry was in a hurry to get home. He had a good reason. The bar was waiting for him. The company office was in complete chaos. There were no executives, not because they didn't show up. It was just that the network had no management at all. The rumor that the channel had been bought paralyzed the work. Nobody realized whether they were working or not, whether to collect airtime or not, but no one saw the new owner. Nanny's appearance added to the nervousness. She was met with surprised looks. She was looked at like a ghost that had just been baptized. She didn't want to tell what had happened to her, so the whole channel was buzzing with rumors and gossip about what she told her department. "We don't know what the new brood has swept out, but we're getting ready to go live tonight. We'll see what happens next." The abandoned Arnold suddenly deflated. He seemed to have lost weight and was wandering around the channel, eavesdropping and peeping just in case. He was being followed from everywhere. At last, he could be sent away without fear that he would run in and complain, with no one to report to. Nanny, is it true there's a criminal case against Barbara?" "Would you know better? I mean, you were in charge." Nanny, where were you and your lover? Were you flying to Dubai?" She suddenly wanted to go sailing on a yacht on the seas, on the waves. Alas, what do you need that you're not afraid of being unemployed, aren't you? New directors always come with their own drivers, so go out, Arnold, get a job. What a nasty piece of work. How did they put up with him all these years? To hell with those bastards. Well, so I don't lose my job. Who knows, maybe this new owner will bring in his own team or change the concept of broadcasting. And not the news, not entertainment, not the children's section won't be needed. Well, we'll find out soon enough. After lunch, a group of young people showed up, closed themselves in the director's office, and an hour later the secretary ran through the channel and ordered everyone to gather immediately in the studio. There they were met by a strange young man wearing pants, a hat, a knitted hooded sweater decorated with either bracelets or champagne shores. He looked strange, especially against the background of three long-legged models. They apparently had an idea of the office dress code, but understood it in their own way. White top, black bottom. One of them had a skirt that wasn't visible under her jacket. Another had a white blouse with a neckline up to her navel. The third seemed decent enough until she turned away. There was a neckline, such a neckline. The company's employees, gathered in a bunch, looked at their new bosses. Someone whispered, "Now our finances will be fine." All that remained was to set the studio pilot straight. They tried not to laugh, but nervous laughter still broke through. Colleagues, my name is Alexander. I am the owner of the TV channel. You already know that the general and commercial directors have been fired. I'd like to introduce you to the new commercial director, Leslie. Step forward. There's a girl in a jacket. Advertising. We have new plans and discipline requirements for you. If anyone doesn't like it, no objections will be accepted. The faces of the advertising people stretched out. They hadn't seen anything yet, but judging by the tone, nothing good was in store. And we're also terminating the cooperation with the lawyer and the chief accountant. Gentlemen, are you fired? Lawyer Emma, accountant Suzanne. Two of the models have stepped forward. Everyone else continues to work. We'll probably keep someone else, but after we evaluate everyone's performance. Well said. Very specific. In the meantime, you guys keep working, and we won't fire everyone at once, but one at a time. Get in line. In the meantime, try your best to prove your indispensability and your loyalty to the new management. He almost said to betray your co-workers if you don't want to be fired. Nanny was devastated. This is the end of the channel. This parrot with delusions of grandeur will ruin the company in 6 months, if not sooner. You have to live with television or it won't work. The previous ones knew what television was. This one came to show off. He'll never make it. He wasted his money buying the channel. Daddy's money, as it turned out. What do we do now? Pack up and leave? Nanny couldn't imagine herself without television. She decided to wait and see how this show of destruction would end. It was clear that everything would fall apart. Of that she had no doubt. The competitor was BBS TV, a non-government channel. It was run by a man Nanny knew well. When it became clear that BBS TV was in big trouble, he called Nanny. "Nanny, if you really need it, come to me as a program editor. I won't put you on the air. We have our own staff, but I will gladly take you on as an editor. I realize it's not your level, but keep that in mind. It's all gone to hell. No new programs. Advertisers were leaving for other channels. There was nothing to fill the airwaves. Nanny watched her own programs and was ashamed. Nothing but reruns. Gradually, cameramen and journalists began to scatter. And everyone noticed that while cameramen found work on other channels, journalists, people with a name and even winners of regional TEFI awards were not hired by any city channel. The impression was that it was a conspiracy of those who had nothing to hold on to in the city. They would send their resumes and stories to California, Washington, D.C., Meehan, and they were gladly taken. These are family people. They just couldn't change cities like that. Alexander walked into the office, which in itself was strange. He'd never walked the canal. He'd never been here at all. A girl named Nanny walked in next to him. "And this is Katie. We've hired her as a program editor. Don't worry, you won't be fired. You have a mandate. Katie will be helping you. You have a lot of work to do. It'll be helpful. And the fact that the position is called that is a staffing flaw. Of course, 2 editors per show is fine. Don't worry, Nanny. Prepare to be fired calmly, especially since you don't have to get to know Katie. You've known each other for a long time. Kathy worked at the City Channel in the same position as Nanny. I wonder what grand promise was made to her that she left her beloved stable job, where she had long been a professional with unquestioned authority, and moved to this doomed channel, or maybe she doesn't know. Oh well, everyone in this town who is connected with television has known for a long time. I wonder how long it'll be before I'm fired. Katie's got a couple weeks to see how things work around here. She won't need any more help. She's an experienced editor after all. Thank God she was smart enough to hire a professional instead of bringing in another model. Well, it's time to get ready. The May holidays were long. Something was postponed from weekdays to weekends. As a result, there was a week of weekends. Usually in such cases, everyone went on vacation. In addition to the broadcasting service, television has to show programs on weekends and holidays. We would schedule programs for 2 days, then rest. Then we would go to work again and plan for 2 more days. This time they announced that the channel was closing for a week and no one was to be there. Nanny didn't understand what was going on at all. We're not going to broadcast. We will. But how? We'll prepare everything in advance. But during the holiday week, there will be no one on the channel but the boxes. It's impossible to plan a week of broadcasting in one day. Today is the last working day. The next one is May 7th. Something's not clear. Yes, it's very clear. It'd be better if they just fired me instead of setting me up like this. Sure, she'll take home what she can and send boxes of airplay, chunks of airplay, but without a studio, without the ability to change or fix anything. It's monkey work. Katie's help under her kills. But she couldn't help at all. I have to turn in my work today at my old place. Nanny, I'd help you, but believe me, I can't. Oh, in some ways I do. Why else would they hire assistants? If not so they can disappear at the most convenient moment, I wish I could just quit and say to hell with it. But no, what about the broadcast? The viewers don't care about us fighting. They want to watch their favorite programs and shows at night. Nanny tried to plan at least 5 days, but nothing worked. A security guard came in. Nanny, I'm sorry, but you have to leave. Alexander called, asking who was there. I told him it was you. He ordered everyone removed immediately. Except for the broadcast shift. No one's supposed to be here. I'm sorry. Yes, that's all right. I'll take the broadcast sheets and leave. The nightly broadcast was in the studio. I've been kicked out of here for a week. I'll be sending in my shift programs from home for editing. You understand, there won't be any specifics. Just have them call me anytime. I don't think that's gonna help. Take care of yourselves. I hope they're setting me up. They won't hurt you. It was a terrible weekend. Nanny saw what was happening on the broadcast. It was a nightmare, a nightmare, a nightmare, a horror, a horror. There was nothing she could fix. It's a good thing that viewers don't care that commercials and commercial programs don't air on time, and not all of them. They only care that the show is on. Nanny realized this was a disaster and foresaw the consequences. Angry advertisers demanding refunds. And Nanny was the scapegoat. After the holidays, she was called on the carpet. They sat there all important, and Kathy was one of them. And Nanny was asked to sit down. She pushed her chair against the wall and sat up straight. Judges and defendants. Either you voluntarily write a statement or we dismiss you for sabotage. What do you mean, sabotage? Why is this happening so often? Evan's been watching the broadcast all weekend. She found a lot of irregularities. Evan, poor Katie didn't get any rest. She worked all weekend and didn't have time to plan the broadcast properly. Of course, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to get Nanny fired. It would have been better if they just said, "Hey, quit." They turned off the broadcast. I can say something. No one was interested. Nanny stood up, wanting to put the chair back, but felt she couldn't help herself and threw the chair at the judges. She wanted so badly to scream and tell them to go to hell, but she calmly restrained herself. She left the office, and in the reception area she took a piece of paper and wrote her resignation letter. A little later, she was informed that she had to work another 2 weeks. They were afraid she would cause trouble, or maybe Kathy wasn't ready yet. Nanny could have caused trouble with the same oversight at the checkpoint. There's plenty of data. But why these TV gurus are about to get themselves killed? She sent her resume to the city. She'll have to move. What else could she do besides scheduling programs? Nanny didn't know how to do anything else. A week passed. The city was silent. She wasn't even invited for an interview. Nanny called. "Hello, I sent in an application for a producer position, but I haven't heard back. I'm Nanny." "Nanny, I'm sorry, but the director personally said your resume is not being considered. You're not a good fit for us." "That's something. I wonder who this Alexander guy is. How can he put pressure on TV channel directors? Why aren't they hiring BBS television employees?" The last day of work fell on Friday. They were preparing for a weekend broadcast. After lunch, Nanny was told to go to the accounting department for a settlement and was paid a ridiculously small amount. Not even a salary, just cents. And of course, no compensation for unused vacation days. "Dan, you choke on this." Nanny opened her workbook and a wave of resentment came over her. How much longer could she be bullied? "What's bothering you so much?" It turns out she was fired 2 weeks ago, the day she wrote her application, softly and forcibly. Nanny deleted everything she had been doing on her computer since morning and started packing her things. "Nanny, where are you going? Don't you have to finish today's work? Did you tell your boss?" "Katie, you owe her. I've been working for you for 2 weeks for free. Come on, honey, get to work. You got 4 hours left, and we got 2 days to get you on the air. And I'm sorry, but I don't wish you luck." Looking at Katie's drawn-out face, Nanny thought it was high time she learned to stand up for herself. Of course, this didn't amount to full-blown revenge. It's just a little prank, but it feels good. How to move on with her life? Nanny loved her job. When her friends complained about work, saying they didn't want to go there, Nanny felt happy. Her soul clenched at how lucky she was. She happily ran to work in the morning, seeing the frowning faces on the bus and realizing that for these people, work was a necessary duty, and for her it was an endless day and night. An interesting, fulfilling life. And now there is no life at all. Grieving and feeling sorry for yourself may be fun, but you have to get a job. What can you do, Nanny? Nothing. She has a pedagogical degree, but she's never been a teacher. She even forgot what she knew. No one would take her to school. She didn't want to. She'd chosen the wrong profession. She didn't know how to handle children. She was just afraid, especially when there were more than 2. She should be looking for an editing job. Television is out of the question. That leaves only newspapers, although there aren't many of those now, except for the small circulation departmental ones. But now is not the time to be picky. She has to find something. A small factory producing plastic enclosures had its own newspaper, both as a newspaper and as a leaflet. Nanny had been taken there as editor-in-chief, although there were no others there. The whole staff consisted of 2 people. Nanny was the editor and journalist, and Alex was the photographer, designer, and helicopter operator. Nanny wrote articles about the leading manufacturers, praising their wonderful best pipes in the world, which even China buys. There wasn't much work. The newspaper was published twice a month, and no one read it. The heroes of the articles took all the copies to show off to their family and friends. It wasn't work, it was boring. Now Nanny understood how she could make herself get up in the morning and drag herself to work. Nanny wrote 2 or 3 articles in a couple days. Alex took pictures of the leaders and the incredible beauty of the pipes and screens. Then he quickly drew headlines, arranged text and pictures. And that was it. The issue was ready. All that was left was to print it. Alex rushed off to shoot weddings and anniversaries. Nanny tried in vain to find a more interesting job. She was not used to wasting her time so fruitlessly. In the evening, Maddie came running. Nanny, as usual, complained about the stupid and useless work and envied Mighty, who still worked at the canal. Everyone had scattered though, and the atmosphere there was still the same. But at least it wasn't a paintbrush. The channel's going to go under soon anyway. That's the way it's going. There was another scandal today. Katie brought in the editing sheets and Max said it was impossible to work with that crap. Our brilliant director jumped up and there was a real ugly fight. They even called the police. What's gonna happen to Max now? Everything will be fine. Alexander offered him money not to file a report. Max refused the money. He said that people like Kozlov should be taught a lesson and he wrote the letter of resignation. By the way, I did too. Why did you do that? All decent people left the channel. I don't want to sit on this dump. I have other plans. Nanny, I think I'm finally getting married. I thought you'd never decide. How I envy you. Where can I find a man like you? I think you will soon. What's that mysterious tone? Don't you dare introduce me to men. Who do you think you are? A matchmaker? The summer without Maddie was dull and dreary. No one could tell what was going on out there. No news or gossip from former coworkers reached them. Nanny ran into them in the most unexpected places. One had become a restaurant manager. Another had started a private business. Somehow they found themselves useful in Boston, but not in their hometown. Nanny saw two journalists on the central channels. They were suitable for Boston, but not for their hometown. Maddie called one day and excitedly announced that the former BBS television employees had decided to throw a reunion party. They'd invited only people they'd worked well with. Why invite all kinds of people? Nanny, can you believe we're all getting back together? The guys promised to bring all the movies we made for the channel's anniversary. We'll watch them and reminisce. We wanted to rent a cottage in the country, and I suggested that Harry and I come over. Is the house big enough? Can we stay in guest houses? I can't wait to see everyone. I miss them terribly. We used to have such wonderful barbecues. Remember how we used to cook and have such a good time? Did she get Nanny's energy? She really wanted to see the people she lived with. Many happy, joy-filled years. To remember how great it was to do what she loved, not to print a newspaper that no one smelled. And she also wanted to go on a trip to the master of the forest and visit the house. It would seem, why return to the place where she had experienced such fear, almost died of terror and cold? But people are often drawn back to the place where they experienced strong emotions. Adrenaline must be in short supply. Nanny wanted to climb the stairs, look at the finished walls, stroke the savior stove. It seemed to her that the house on chicken legs in the magic forest was waiting for her. Not all of its secrets had been revealed. They wanted to be shared. It occurred to her that when she returned there, all her fears would disappear and something very good would surely happen. She wanted to go back in time, to hug her favorite colleagues, to make all the gloom, the present at least for a while, recede, or better yet, disappear forever. It seemed that this meeting would change her life. But what could change? Only more longing would be added when she would have to go back to being alone and writing meaningless articles about the world's best pipes. Maddie, as the mistress of the house, gave everyone errands and tasks to do. She was preparing for a reunion with her friends, or at least a formal reception at the country mansion. Nanny tried to stop her somehow, but she wouldn't listen to her. She was torn with the urge to brag about her farm, her house, her woods, and most importantly, Harry. Envy, a bad feeling, but that's when you're jealous, and when you catch someone's enthusiasm. As Nanny had caught the enthusiasm of her good friend, she couldn't wait for the weekend, the longest week of her life. Cindy, a journalist, called Nanny and offered her a ride in her car. There's a great place. You don't have to bother Harry to pick you up. And it's nicer than riding the bus. The weather was perfect, sunny, warm. The autumn forest was a wall of colorful brightness. Especially the clones were reveling, shimmering with all colors, as if they decided to show everyone who was the most beautiful here. Only the pine forest remained gloomy and austere. He did not care about this riot of colors. He was not interested in it. It was all just a game. Enjoy it. You can't say that the TV crew was one big happy family. It doesn't work that way. Some were friends, some had only professional relationships. There were arguments, grudges. Journalists, being creative natures, sometimes shouted at each other without restraint, a little hiss like bubbles, and then continued to work as if nothing had happened. It's just work. Personal relationships have nothing to do with it. Once upon a time, in the early years of the channel's existence, there was a program in which every resident of the city could congratulate his friends and relatives. Congratulate them on their birthday, on their anniversary, on anything. Write a greeting or choose a poem from the catalog, order a song. It was terribly provincial, but the audience loved it, especially the secretaries who were slacking off on their husbands, typing congratulations from Alice. The announcer Eva burst into the office and threw the sheets with congratulations on the table. Alice, I understand that you have a lot of work, but you would at least put underscores. How am I supposed to read this? In the text of the congratulations, she listed about a dozen names and surnames. They were all either Tatar or Kazakh. They were difficult to pronounce. Eva, I put the accent mark. You have to put it everywhere. Where do I put the accent mark in the Transguest database? Alice raised surprised eyes. Eva, Transgas congratulates you. It's not a Tatar surname. It's a base that deals with gas transportation. And here's a conflict for you. They had a long laugh about the Tatar last name. Everyone was so happy with each other, as if they had met the closest relatives after a long separation. Hugging, kissing, even those who had never been on friendly terms. It was interesting to see how everyone was doing and what they were doing. Everyone was interested in the question, what about the canal? There was no more channeling. Martha's manager showed a video she had taken the day before. Nanny didn't even immediately realize she was seeing on the screen some room with no lights, no openings, wires picked out of the walls, stripped walls. It looked like a house prepared for demolition. Then she realized with astonishment that she was seeing her office in the editing studio. What was this? Alexander closed the channel and left. He kicked out everyone who had worked for years, who knew the channels thoroughly, and put in people like him, arrogant and understanding nothing about television. He kicked out all the technicians, and his foreman ruined all the equipment. Advertisers broke contracts and demanded their money back. Then this underhanded tycoon tore down all the fixtures, doors, plumbing, wall panels, even switches. He walked away with wires, toilets, and $6 million in debt. Everyone sat there like pancakes. It was unbelievable. One idiot comes in and manages to ruin everything in 6 months. What he paid for it was no consolation. It'll turn up somewhere else. Things like that don't sink. It was painful and hurtful. I wanted to cry. The girls wiped away their tears. The guys were expressing their opinions in far from parliamentary terms. Guys, Maddie wiped her tears. Let's drink to the fact that we had such a job in our lives. It was a happy time spent together. We were lucky. We had it. Someone turned on a video clip taken for the last corporate party, which was a rock party. Everyone was in black with chains and spikes. Horrible makeup and mohawks. The video was powerful, but it was filmed in bits and pieces for a week. By the time we watched the movie of how it was filmed, we were crying with laughter. Then we watched other movies, remembered the pictures. It was both funny and sad. We sang, danced, sat by the fire for a long time, hugged and swore in eternal love. But as usual, the morning was a little awkward. Everyone had urgent business to attend to. We said goodbye, promising to meet again, and then we left. Yes, it's understandable that nothing connects them anymore. They will remember and be sad, but everyone has their own way. No one wanted that. And so it happened. Nanny was getting ready to go home too. She wanted to go into the woods, but it was inconvenient to bother Maddie and Harry, with so many guests singing and crying. One should take a long and thoughtful rest, but Maddie didn't agree. You're not going anywhere. I missed you so much. We haven't even had a chance to talk. Let's go mushroom picking, walk in the woods, talk. Yeah, I can't tell the difference between a penny donut and a porcini mushroom. You're just blaming yourself. Every dog recognizes a bun. What if you pick something gross? Then I'll send you away. Nanny, well, do what you want. You want to go out so much. Why do you always forbid yourself everything? Are you afraid of making Harry and me uncomfortable? Stop it. I really want you to stay. Harry and I miss you. It's fun to have a lot of guests, but I want to spend the evening with you, drinking and talking. So get ready. We're going mushroom picking. And really, I don't want to go. Why go to the trouble of singing my own song? Especially since they're genuinely inviting you to stay. And Nanny went to get ready for the mushroom picking. Let them figure out what to do with what she thought were mushrooms. The girls walked through the woods, talking about something, sometimes silently, niggling with mushrooms. That wasn't why they went to the woods. Maddie had no one to tell about her new happy life. Turns out there was no one to share it with but Nanny. She didn't know it could be so simple and peaceful. In the past, of course, she had fallen in love, but somehow she was quickly disappointed. One wasn't smart enough. The other was a narcissist, and no one was interested in anyone but themselves. Then one day she met a funny guy who made lighthearted jokes. Do you know a joker like that? I'd like something a little calmer. He taught me that the most important thing in life is money. The more money, the stronger the love. I had already thought they were all like that when the women at the entrance finished the phrase to the neighbors. What a man he is. Not a man left. I started to believe them. And suddenly Harry. This is my reward for waiting. Harry's a good man, but you've made him perfect. Not too perfect. He's perfect, and a prince and a knight, the best and loyal and loving. All right, you've convinced me that arguing with a woman in love is a waste of time. I see you so happy in love. It hurts my soul. It's not jealousy, but a crushing regret. Why can't I have that? But on the other hand, you did it. Then there's hope that I'll do it too. You will. All right, I'll look for mushrooms. You go to the picking. You wanted to. So we'll go together. But I'm not nostalgic about the mushroom, Daddy. No, I'm wandering around. Nanny walked towards the gathering. The ground was strewn with needles and cones. The golden colors of autumn remained at the edge of the forest, and the woods were dark and damp. She thought about how much her life had changed in the last few months. Here was her little house, in winter almost buried under the snow, and now it really looked like the dwelling of Baba Yaga or the summoner. Dark, gloomy, standing on stilts, as if on chicken legs. Nanny stood there, feeling uneasy in her soul, as if this was not a disaster, but something important, or maybe not a premonition, but just a memory of an experience. The stairs, which had been an insurmountable obstacle in the winter, now came in handy. Nanny got up, opened the door, and immediately saw that someone was standing by the table. Strange, Harry hadn't said there were hunters here. Too bad. I wanted to be alone. I'll have to go. Hello, I'll be right out of your way. I won't disturb you. Just don't leave right away. I've been waiting for you for an hour. A man turned around, and I thought it was Anthony. No, it wasn't. It's really him. How could it be any other way? It's not surprising. It's been 10 years, but it's definitely him. Nanny looked at him with widened eyes. Yes, she'd had a dream. The roof had come off. Anthony couldn't be here, and he's standing here smiling. Nanny walked over and stroked his arm, and Anthony put his arm around her and held her tightly against him. The roof didn't fail. He's alive and real. Anthony left home then and never came back to Washington. It turned out that his father had been seriously ill for a long time. Anthony was told nothing. Let him study in peace. But now it was impossible to hide. It was obvious. His father could not be released from the hospital. He couldn't be disconnected from the machines. Mom went to the hospital after work and spent all nights at the bedside of her beloved Anthony. She offered to take turns, persuaded her to get some rest. She refused. She was afraid her husband would leave when she wasn't there. And that can't happen. He must know that his wife is there for him. Then he won't be so afraid. Anthony transferred to the University of Nevada as a part-time student. He couldn't leave his mom alone at night. Anthony couldn't sleep. Mom was in the hospital and he was restless. He got up, tried to read, and lay down again, but he couldn't fall asleep. He heard a key turn in the door and went out into the hallway. Standing in the doorway was his mother. She had left the house in her coat and shoes, but now she stood in slippers, a gown, and a hospital gown thrown over her shoulders. "Anthony, Daddy's gone," she whispered and started sliding down the wall. Fainted. Anthony carried Mom to the couch, ran for Snuffles, but she woke up on her own. "Mommy, where were your things when you got home?" He looked at the clock. 3 o'clock. The ambulance was late. "I couldn't sit alone until morning. I'll get my stuff tomorrow." Anthony stayed home, studying, working, and trying to find Nanny. Sabrina knew exactly where Nanny lived, but all of Anthony's letters went unanswered. Who else could he turn to? He didn't know. He was working, considered a very promising scientist, but his personal life was a complete failure. Mom didn't hint anymore. She bluntly told him that it was time for such a big boy to get married. He replied that when he met someone like Nanny, he would get married. "Who's Nanny? I'd like to see her. And if you don't, Mom, give me a little more time. I swear I'll get married in a couple of years. Don't make a monster out of me. I want you to be happy. And it looks like you won't be without your nanny." A couple months ago, a former classmate who now teaches at Washington University called. "Our dean's office got a call from an older man, Harry. He used to be a student here. I don't remember him. He's older than us. He's looking for Anthony, a former physics and math student who got into tourism about 10 years ago. And I was thinking, maybe it's you." "Why?" I didn't tell him. "I'll send you his phone number and you can find out for yourself if he's looking for you and why." It's strange that Anthony doesn't remember any Harry, but if someone is looking for him, there must be something important to say. though Anthony couldn't even begin to guess why this Harry would want him. Most likely, he needs a very different Anthony. When a complete stranger asked if he knew a girl named Nanny, Anthony didn't immediately realize what he was being asked. Nanny who? My nanny? Well, I don't know if she's yours or not, but I have an acquaintance named Nanny who recently told a heartbreaking story of their college years. There was some Anthony she remembered all those years ago, but was afraid he was either happily married or an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm neither married nor an alcoholic. So this must be your nanny. I hope so. I'm sending you a picture right now. If that's her, we have a lot to talk about. Anthony looked at Nanny's picture and couldn't believe it was real. God bless this stranger Harry, who for some reason not only listened to Nanny's story, but decided to find Anthony. He had no way of knowing where the search would lead. Maybe Anthony wouldn't remember any Nanny, or maybe he would, but there was no place for her in his present life. Mom, you wanted to see Nanny? Look, there she is. That's why you've been suffering all these years. I thought it was something else. There's a girl, just a girl. No, not a girl, a dream. And it looks like it's coming true. Anthony would go straight to work, but he's on vacation in 2 months. How is that possible? A 10-year dream of meeting someone. And now that Nanny had been found, waiting another 2 months seemed an unbearably long time. When Harry realized that this was the right Anthony, he forbade Maddie to say anything to Nanny. Who knows this Anthony? He seemed genuinely pleased, but then thought it best not to disrupt his settled life and come over. What would happen to Nanny then? Well, let him come first. No one died of pleasant surprises. Maddie couldn't keep quiet. She felt the urge to share with Nanny, but at Harry's request, she held back as best she could. If Anthony didn't come, Nanny wouldn't know anything, and she wouldn't be disappointed. She would continue to remember him fondly. Maddie had faith that Anthony would come, though. When Anthony announced the date of his departure, Harry explained that they had to go to the farm the day before, as there would be a fabulous party of former co-workers, and Nanny had to be persuaded by any means necessary to stay with Maddie. It succeeded brilliantly. An hour before Anthony arrived, Harry sent the girls off to pick mushrooms, warned Maddie that Nanny should go to the farm alone. Don't go with her. Anthony would be waiting for her there. Any surprise must be carried through to the end. While the girls chatted in the fall woods, Harry met Anthony and took him away. Harry was afraid his cunning plan would go to hell. If for some reason Nanny decided not to come here, what a shame it would be if these two idiots in love, who had wasted 10 years, never met again. But if they do, it won't be here, of course, but at the farm. But they want romance. When he saw Nanny walking toward the house among the pine trees, he patted Anthony's shoulder approvingly, saying, "Go ahead, do it." He quickly slipped down the stairs and disappeared into the woods. He is the master here. Every tree would hide him. Harry saw Nanny stand outside the house, climb the stairs, and go inside. Well, he had done all he could. The rest was up to them. In the hut, Nanny and Anthony looked at each other and were silent. What was there to say? It seemed to each of them that their dream had come true. But you can't say it out loud. What if it's only your dream? The other person doesn't care. Anthony would have said it a long time ago. He didn't have the strength to keep quiet anymore, but he was afraid because he'd already said it once. It turned into 10 years of longing. Nanny kept silent because she felt guilty about this long separation, about their mutual homelessness. If Anthony was doing well, he wouldn't have rushed into that hut. Now that he's rushed in, it's not all smooth sailing. Whose fault is that? That's right, Nanny. Who's gonna forgive that? You've ruined your business. Anthony doesn't have to understand and forgive everything. You can't stay silent all the time. No matter how silent and reserved you are, you have to talk. They've been silent for 10 years. Now it's time to talk. Nanny, I've come for you. Anthony decided that he should start with the main thing and then see how it went. I know there's nothing keeping you in this town. Come with me. Well, I can't do it right away. 10 years ago, you couldn't do it right away. It's been 10 years and you still can't do it right away. How long does it take for your rightness to disappear? Tell me, did you like me then? I liked you. Why did you refuse? Why didn't you come with me? I was scared. Everything happened too fast. My parents always taught me to get to know someone better. You can't just marry on a whim. Look at us. We may not have been in love, but we lived a decent life. Of course, I didn't want to be like them. Give me an unearthly love. But I didn't realize that you were my ethereal love. It all happened too fast. And when you invited me, I, a mommy's girl, was afraid of change, afraid to leave my parents, scared. And I didn't think then that I'd regret it all these years. Big things seemed possible at a distance. The distance turned out to be very great. If my life didn't work out, so be it. Forgive me. I'm sorry to you. That's right. That's what they told me. A beautiful girl with a strange habit of taking on the sins of the world. That's why I fell in love with you back then. You were so close, and you're certainly not guilty of anything in front of me. If you refuse now, that's understandable too. He flew here after 10 years, and I'm sure he was expected. Our dialogue has reached an impasse. The cuckoo praises the rooster for praising the cuckoo. That's us. Let's go around the house. I have a feeling everyone's already figured it out, waiting for us. And they're all tongue-tied about it. Let's go. Otherwise, they'll be waiting. Yes, they'll be rushing around here, checking if everyone's alive. 5 kilometers across the soggy field is not conducive to frankness. They walked, kicked cones, and talked about living without each other. Anthony talked more about how bad it was without love and affection. Nanny started talking about work, realizing that no one was interested in work. Much less her feelings, she couldn't talk about them. Maddie paced outside the wicket. Why aren't they coming? Had something happened? Harry tried to reassure her at first. Then he gave up. Do you want to jump? What could happen? Worst case scenario. It would turn out that teenage love should be left in the past, not clung to in adulthood. Turns out they don't need each other. They'll talk and go their separate ways. Poor guy. He's come this far. On the other hand, it's better to fly once than to dream all your life. They'll go their separate ways and start a new life. From illusions. It's possible. Yes, but I don't want that to happen. Harry listened to Nanny talking to Anthony. He thought they both sounded sincere. Yes, a person could change beyond recognition in 10 years. But Harry felt that these two hadn't changed. One didn't believe in feelings, the other didn't know how to insist. The same thing couldn't be allowed to happen again. Harry would do anything to bring these two closer together. It turns out that helping people become happy is a very exciting activity that excites and boosts self-esteem. Nanny and Anthony walked out with impenetrable faces. It's unclear if they're in love or what to talk to them about their bright future or the nice weather. Well, at least a hint of how things are going. No, they are silent. Harry was chopping wood for the bath. Anthony sat staring into the void. Physicists are strange people, but this one seemed normal. Hey, scientist, get the wood, bring it to the bathhouse. Harry may have liked me, but he didn't like this one very much. He was very noisy. She's been dreaming about you for 10 years? Harry got very angry. Are you physicists such idiots? You don't understand anything about life. Aren't you afraid of dying in your experiments? A declaration of love is out of the question. It's scary. What should I do now? Accept the offer. If you don't, you'll never know. But how he found his dream after 10 years, realized that he is not indifferent and stuck, not knowing what to do next. A smart, decent, successful man in life. Afraid to propose to the woman he loves, although he's understandable. He's been living with this dream for 10 years. And if Nanny says no, there won't be a dream left. Harry and Anthony carried wood to the bathhouse, and Nanny sat on the veranda and watched them. Damn handsome guys. It's understandable that men should be appreciated for their intelligence and decency. But it's so nice to look at handsome, strong men. Maddie came over and sat down next to me. Nanny, why aren't you talking? What's wrong? Are you disappointed? We're sorry, me and Harry. We meant well. Oh, my friend, what are you saying? You've done so much for me. I just can't believe this is about him. Thank you. I knew it was possible to find Anthony, but I never would have done it on my own. I was afraid that when I met him, I'd find out there was no love at all, just adolescent stupidity. But there is love. Oh, Maddie, I think I'm lost. I like it so much. The evening was quiet and warm, not at all autumnal. Nanny stood on the porch and looked up at the mighty, century-old pines, frozen in their majesty. Anthony came out of the house and stood beside her. Nanny, marry me, just like that. Harry said good goods should be taken at once before they are snatched away from under your nose. But since Harry said so, I'll think about it. You've been thinking for 10 years, and now you want to think again? How much time? A couple minutes will be enough. Nanny paused and looked into Anthony's eyes. I agree. Why are you crying? My love, don't cry. Everything is fine now. Nanny looked at him. The tears flowed by themselves. All the resentment and self-pity had gone with the tears. The troubles and misfortunes were in the past. Nanny whispered, feeling light and calm. My tomorrow has come.